From outrageous to illegal? The wild world of parent demands. I'm a camp counselor at an overnight camp. One kid's mum called to tell us that her kid can't drink water or take a shower because he was going to have a mental breakdown from all the minerals in the contaminated water. She said he could only be exposed to pure water, whatever that means. Long story short, she tried to sue us for unsanitary water conditions. Lady, your kid's going to have a mental breakdown from the dehydration from the lack of water, whether purified or not. I worked at a camp and a parent came to me explaining how her child would need help going to the bathroom, specifically wiping as they're not potty trained. The child was 7. He wasn't special needs or anything like that. His mother just always did it for him. We refunded money to the parent and explained that being potty trained was one of the conditions for the camp. My husband's nephew is this way. I hate it. His mother is a horrible person and he's a nightmare child. He just does whatever he wants and screams and curses in your face whenever you try to get him to stop. He'll scream things like, "I'll punch you in the ding-dong," or "I'll frickin' kill you," and nothing anyone does will make him behave. He's not properly potty trained and he's like 6 or 7, I don't know. I actively avoid him because he's such a little crap bag. He'll just sit on the toilet screaming, "I'm done," until someone comes and wipes for him. It's horrible and disgusting and I don't know how he handles school. Used to work at the mall. The amount of people who'd ask us to watch their kids while they finished shopping was astounding. The worst, though, was the woman who just left her 5-year-old daughter at the store because we had a kids' table and she told her to sit there and play. It was a stupid busy day, so we didn't notice at first, but then when it slowed, we realized we had an abandoned kid on our hands. The manager was on the phone with security when the mum came back, grabbed the kid, and effed off without a word. Our library children's staff regularly found young children abandoned in their department. About once a month, someone dumps their kid at the library and doesn't show up before closing. One of the staff waits with the kid for a while, but eventually we have to call the cops. It's amazing how many of them are crappy about it too. We don't get paid overtime, folks. We had parents a few weeks ago that told the principal of the school that they were keeping their child home the entire week of Substance Awareness Week, because it shouldn't be the school's responsibility to explain substances to kids. These parents wanted to educate the child on the matter themselves. Both of them were lacking about half their teeth, and the other teeth were brownish. They had gaunt faces, so many pimples and pits, and were very skinny. Total crystal heads. Oh boy, that's the I did my own research crowd of the substance world right there, and an absolute tragedy waiting to happen. Poor kid. I hope he could at least get a pamphlet or something. Worked at a summer camp for a month a couple of years ago. In my bunk, I had a kid come from France. Sweetest kid I've ever met. Looked like he was loving camp. 2 weeks in, we get a call from his mum claiming her son isn't getting enough time to do arts and crafts, which was his favorite. No problem, my supervisor arranges it so I can take my bunk to the arts and crafts center more often. 2 days later, she complains he's still not getting enough and pulls him out of camp. There's no possible way that she could have gotten a letter saying that even if she was staying in Canada, which she was. Letters took at least 4 to 5 days to get to the parents. She just legit ruined her kid's summer, who I spoke to directly in French, and he told me he was having the best time there. I actually adored that kid. He was one of the few not entitled little buttholes I had in my bunk. I hope he was furious at her. She used her own selfishness to ruin his summer trip. I've worked at a large summer camp for the last 4 summers, and I'd been a camper for the 8 previous ones. 4 years ago, my friends and I were essentially counselors in training, and 2 of my friends were given their own cabin of campers as real counselors, as recognition for having done a good job. When being told about the campers they were going to have, they were informed that the parents of one of the campers had sent the camp bottles upon bottles of sugary flavored water, because this kid apparently didn't drink water at all. My friends had to constantly carry around multiple large bottles of this flavored water in their backpacks because the camper refused to drink any real water. And being counselors in training, my friends didn't feel like they were in the place to actually try to do something about it, so they had to suffer through carrying multiple liters of this camper's water for 10 days around a very large camp. The next summer, another of my friends had this camper in his cabin. The camper still wasn't drinking water, but my friend wasn't having it. So for the next 3 weeks, he slowly diluted the flavored water until by the end he was giving the kid just water in the flavored bottles. When he told the camper and the parents at the end of summer, they were all stunned and happy that he was finally able to drink real water. Now the camper still comes to the camp every summer, and from what I can tell, he's just drinking like normal water now. The friend who got him to drink water, by the way, won Counselor of the Year at the camp the following summer. The following are things I had parents ask me to do while I taught. calling them when their child had homework. Not just in my class, but like in general. Like if he has math homework, I, the English teacher, need to call his mother. Call home if he speaks to a certain kid. At all. During the day. I've no idea how I'm supposed to know if they talk to that other kid. To call home if he trades for other food at lunch. I don't even have lunch duty. I asked if it was an allergy concern. Mind you, these were middle school-age kids, not little ones, and the mum said she just wanted to know if he traded. I had to call home if their grade dropped below a 95%. They wanted us to hold an assembly because their son's calculator had been stolen, and Dad was convinced he could pick the culprit out of a crowd. No assembly was held, the calculator was found in the bottom of his locker under some paper. And the best one of all was an email I received from a parent asking to please excuse their daughter from reading in an English class. I asked them why, and they said they were trying to keep unhealthy ideas out of her head. I told them she was required to read for class, and I'd observed her reading for fun several times, and she seemed to enjoy it, but that I'd let them know if I saw her reading anything inappropriate. Actually, now that I'm listing it out, I realize that there are just too many. Parents are absurd. Back when I was a teacher, it was parent-teacher conference day and a parent came in. Her son was pretty unremarkable, maybe B or C average kind of student, didn't cause any problems in class. The parent looks livid and ready to fight. I'm not sure why, but they start cussing me out immediately. How dare you let school out early because of a little fricking snow, you fudging butthole! My son had to sit out on the back deck for hours because he doesn't have a key to the house and I was at work so nobody could let him in. Mind you, we let out early a few weeks prior because we were about to get slammed by the snowstorm of the frickin' century, and anyone who didn't know that it was coming was an idiot. I told her that I, a mere high school social studies teacher, didn't have the authority to authorize early release and that she should take her issue up with the superintendent. She got livid and was pretty certain that I had something to do with it personally and continued to cuss me out for 5 more minutes. It was late. It was Valentine's Day. I had a girlfriend I wanted to do things with. I wanted to go home. So I was angry too. I told the lady that maybe she should get her son a key to the house because leaving him outside in the cold for hours was probably worthy of a call to CPS. She got even more livid and threatened to call Child Protection Services on me for doing that to her son and to tell the principal, school board, FBI, and president that I was mean to her. She at least told the principal because I got a talking to about threatening to call CPS on a parent instead of just doing it. To make things better, my girlfriend was mad because I didn't get home until 8 p.m. So, in summary, the most unreasonable thing a parent asked me to do was use my powers as a teacher in one building to stop the school district from releasing early before a snowstorm, after the fact. One mum threatened to yank her daughter out of the school if she were not given the vocal solo, "Oh Holy Night," during the annual Christmas concert, a situation I described here some time ago. The daughter had made clear to teaching staff and peers that she didn't want to do the solo and that she didn't have the appropriate voice for it. Still, her mum tried to force the faculty into submitting to her will so that her daughter could have the recognition she deserved. Not really something they wanted me to do for their kids, but for their dog. The mum told me that the neighborhood HOA had a big thing about dog poop on people's grass. Fair enough. But I guess even the smear of it on the grass after it gets picked up, because the woman literally asked me if I could put a bag on my hand and try to catch the poop as it fell out of the dog's backside, so as to not leave a smear on people's lawns. I nodded and said, "Oh yeah, sure, of course," and then just picked up the dog poop after he did his business like a normal human being, because I love and respect myself. What the frick? I know that this is way better than outright animal mistreatment, but somehow it feels nearly as disturbing to me. Just waiting under the animal to scoop it out of the air so His Majesty's noble essence doesn't touch the earth? And what sort of behavior is that going to reinforce in the dog? I'm a babysitter. This story still infuriates my parents years later when they run into this guy. I was 12 at the time and was babysitting for a group of 6 kids between the ages of 4 and 8. The parents had all gone out on a date together. They were supposed to be home at 10 p.m. It was a school night and I had to be up by 7 a.m., as did a few of the kids. Anyhow, the night goes on and it passes 10 p.m., then 10:30. The kids are getting restless and tired. The visiting ones don't have PJs or anything, but I tell them bedtime stories to get them prepped for going home. 11 p.m. passes and the kids are falling asleep. I'm calling the parents to ask if I should keep them awake, since kids sometimes have trouble falling back to sleep, and I'm getting no answer from the cell phone. 12 a.m. and the kids are all passed out on couches and the floor. I'm struggling to stay awake by picking up toys. My parents call me at this time asking why I'm not home. I don't want to get in trouble, so I say the group will be home any minute now. They didn't get home until after 3 a.m. The dad was supposed to drive me home, and he was super drunk. I thought my parents would be asleep at that time, so I got in the car with the drunk driver. We didn't crash, but he did veer off the road a few times. You could see the track marks through the yards of my neighborhood for a while. Needless to say, my parents didn't let me watch those kids again. So yeah, expecting a 12-year-old to watch 6 kids until 3 a.m. on a school night and then driving her home drunk off your butt. Oh, and they didn't pay me extra for the additional 5 hours I put in. My parents would have definitely come to my aid if I'd asked or called or anything, but I was a dumb kid who thought that I was grown up enough just to handle things on my own rather than ask for help. I also didn't have a concept of drunk at 12 because my parents never had more than a beer or two around me. But you'd better believe that when my parents heard the dad was driving funny as he took me home and saw the tracks on a couple of lawns nearby, that my kind and patient father went over there to have a chat with him, and we never heard from that family again. I'm 28 now, and my mum mentioned this story at a neighborhood get-together a few months back, and she was white-knuckled the whole time. My parents are wonderful people, but like Rothfuss says, fear the fury of a patient man. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? High school teacher. I had a parent ask if she could write in her will that if she died, I'd take custody of her kids. I work at a very expensive summer academic camp that brought in lots of extremely elite teenagers from abroad. One kid got mild sunburn, not blistering or anything, just a bit pink, and his mother called in having a total meltdown and demanded we call him an ambulance and that he go to the hospital. Maybe when you're in the 1% and God knows where that makes sense, but it's absolutely insane in the States. She wouldn't take no for an answer. Another mum from the same camp actually flew from Russia with her 16-year-old daughter and just decided she'd stay too, without telling staff. Parents were 100% not allowed to stay at camp, but she booked a hotel for the full 5-week program and showed up at camp every day. We told her constantly her parents weren't allowed in the dorms, but every day I'd run into her coming in and out of her daughter's room, taking her away from class and activities. Her poor daughter was almost certainly suffering from Munchausen by proxy. This one kid told me he didn't have to listen to me because I'm a girl, so I told him to sit in the corner for 5 minutes and reflect on what he'd said. When his parents came to pick him up, they asked that I don't discipline their children as it's against their religion to take orders from women. Pardon? What religion is it? Chauvinism. It's a branch of buttholism. I was a babysitter from a wealthy family. They had a house nanny that lived with them, but she also had to do all the chores, cooking, grocery shopping and stuff, so they asked me to occasionally basically help the live-in nanny. I was in college, so I needed the money. They were bat crap. I knew that before I started though. The dad was a liver specialist doctor, and the mother was a child psychologist. They had 2 dogs, and instead of making sure that they got let outside on routine, they just placed potty training mats all over this massive 4-story house. The parents were obsessed with Star Wars, which I thought was cool, but I realized it was more of a crazy money sink for them. The dad had life-size replicas of most of the main cast, and unless he escorted you into the room that he kept them in, he kept it locked. Not even wife or kids were allowed in, which in itself isn't creepy, but he spent more on those collections than his kids. Also, the mum used to leave her used tampons and pads just anywhere. I'm pretty sure she just changed them whenever she needed, and if a garbage can wasn't near, she'd leave it on the coffee table instead of using the bathroom or something. Anyways, oldest boy was 11, middle sister was 9, and the youngest brother was 2. Pretty easy money most of the time. But the oldest boy at 11 always did weird things, and they told me to never deny the kids outright, but to use positive language to them only. Sure, whatever. So this 11-year-old, I caught him looking at skin flicks, and well, I couldn't tell him to stop. So I just said, "Do you think your parents would be okay with that?" And he did stop, but I caught him a lot more. The family PC was always just right in the open, and when I told the parents, they didn't seem to care. Fine. Well, then this boy asks me if he can see my chest, and I said no. He told his mother, who's never used the word no to these kids, and somehow I was in trouble for telling him no. Like, I shouldn't have to defend why I said that, right? Skip ahead a bit and this kid is slapping my butt now, and I talked to the dad when he gets home from work, and he told me to allow him because he's a straight, almost teen male who's just expressing his feelings. So I tried to explain to a doctor why that was legally problematic, and at 11 he might get away with it, but by 14 he might not be so lucky. I figured I'd have better luck with the child psychologist mother. Nope, she basically agreed that he was healthily expressing his interest in women. Felt like I was the only sane person in the world. They fired me because I was repressing their children. I really hope the kids grow up okay. The other two kids were sweet, but the oldest was a real troublemaker. And years later I heard they got a divorce because the youngest turned out not to be the child of her husband. Well, the divorce is a pity. I'm sorry for these two people who've both left the only person who might have tolerated them. Oh, who am I kidding? They're rich. Somehow. It's frankly worrying that the woman is a child psychologist and that both of them take that view of a woman's agency. Really setting up your kids for failure there, guys. I teach English in France in a nicer area of Paris. Because it's a nicer area, most of my students have been exposed to English most of their lives and speak it conversationally, if not fluently. And I've been asked more than once to teach the class in French. Not just give instructions in French or use both French and English to help the kids that are struggling, but just to speak French for my full 55-minute English lesson. Most of the time it was because the kids weren't doing their work, were goofing off in class and failing because of it, and then they just told their parents it was because I wasn't using French, so they blamed me because there was no way their angel would have lied to them. One kid did this when he spoke fluent, accentless English, and his spelling was better than mine in English most of the time. I've also been told I should do a kid's homework for him, since I'm an American and therefore a native speaker, and if I do it and he studies using it, he'll pick up on things easier. One kid was being toilet trained. Camp policy was that children being toilet trained were given chocolate chips. This girl's mother didn't want her daughter eating so much sugar, so instead she gave us a snack box of tiny, hard raisins. We were supposed to give her one raisin every time she successfully went to potty. This was, of course, enormously successful. I'm 55 and I would poop my pants right here and now if I thought pooping in the toilet was only worth one raisin to somebody. If he misbehaves, don't hit him. Hit the kid next to him. That'll scare him into behaving. I hope you answered, wow, that's exactly what the parents of the kids on either side of him asked for as well. Former middle school lacrosse referee. So many parents wanted to amend the rulebook if I dropped a flag on one of their little angels. I'm a nanny. I work for a wonderful family now, but about 5 years ago when I was young and stupid, I worked for a really difficult family. I stayed with them for longer than I should have because I really loved the kids. The mother was very particular. She'd ask me to clean the kitchen all the time, and if there was so much as a tiny fluff or crumb on the floor, she'd ask me to clean it again. It got to the point where I was sometimes swiffering the kitchen floor 4 times a day, after every meal and before I left at 7:30 at night. She'd frequently ask me to get to her house early. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. just to get there on time. And honestly, when I'd arrive early, the door would be locked and everybody would be asleep. However, the straw that broke the camel's back was when I'd taken 2 of the babies out to the park because the housekeeper was coming that morning and I wanted to get her out of the way. The mom texted me right after I'd gotten to the park and told me to come back to the house and clean up the kids' toys before the housekeeper came, because it wasn't the housekeeper's job to pick up the toys. The fact that this lady didn't want the housekeeper to have to pick up the 5 toys that were on the floor because it wasn't part of her job description, yet she'd have me cleaning the kitchen 4 times a day, which certainly wasn't part of my job description, coupled with the fact that she was at home with no kids and wouldn't pick up the toys herself, made me so furious and I felt like I wasn't being valued at all. I quit shortly after. As an infant teacher at preschool, I had multiple parents who used cloth diapers. That didn't bug me. Standard procedure was that they'd provide some kind of smell-proof bag for us to put the soiled diapers in. No big deal. One mother, though, insisted we rinsed her daughter's soiled cloth diapers in the toilets at my work, even after the directors of the preschool told her we wouldn't be doing that. She got so mad at us for not rinsing the soiled diapers that she stopped providing the smell-proof bag for us. It was really gnarly. I worked as a camp counselor for a local art camp. It was just during the day, and the camps only lasted 5 days each. You wouldn't believe the amount of parents who would drop off their severely autistic kids to people who have 0 special training and are already dealing with a group of 20 to 30 kids. Like, these kids would be non-verbal, freak out at the amount of commotion going on, and they'd always end up just staying with our main education officer all day, while the parent was claiming their kid was just a little shy. Those parents pretty much just treated us as a cheap daycare. Worked at a gymnastics day camp this past summer. Had a parent come in and request that the TOTS director, in charge of the 5 to 7-year-olds, have her child poop in a bag and look through it and try to find the coin that the kid had swallowed the day before. We sent that kid home for the day. The parents of some kid I used to babysit were on a holiday in France about 100 kilometers away from where my parents and I were camping. They asked me if I could drop by and babysit their daughter while they went out to dinner. I cannot say it enough, nobody can babysit your kid while you are home. I had to do it for an entire summer while the kid's mum worked from home. It was the most frustrating and dysfunctional summer of my life. The children would constantly scream and cry for their mother, and even if they forgot that their mum was just in another room for a few minutes, she'd cough or go get a glass of water or something, and the kids would start wailing again. When I went to summer camp, they had move-in day, when all the parents would drive the kids to camp, and we'd pick up our bunks and set our things up. The counselors were there to help with heavy stuff, but generally they let us do it. Then I went to work at a camp in the Catskills, straight out of wet-hot American summer. The kids got their bags sent to camp ahead of the buses from the tri-state area. We were expected to carry all of their huge heavy bags to the cabin and set up all of their stuff at their bunks. Of course, when the kids got theirs, they'd complain about which bunk they had or that we didn't do it right. And that was my intro to this camp with the most spoiled group of little B-words I've ever met. What should people seriously stop buying for everyone's sake? Online IQ tests. If there was a way to fail an IQ test, paying for one online would be it. Animals, if you can't take care of that animal for the rest of their lives. And if you realize that you made a mistake, rehome them. Do not set them free. Most of them will wreak havoc on the native ecosystem. Just look at the Everglades. Herbalife. Does anyone else notice that those Herbalife smoothie places keep popping up all over, but they're so shady about it? They look like the average mom-and-pop smoothie place with no Herbalife branding on the outside or anywhere inside, but then they start making your smoothie and bam, they pull out the Herbalife powder. Cheap children's party favors. We're not talking the colorful pencils and paper pads that actually have some use. I'm talking about the nondescript plastic forms with popular media stickers and other garbage. The amount of trash plastic available for this niche is staggering, especially given that most of those toys hold a child's attention for 2 hours maximum. Also, Happy Meal toys. Great for a collector because most of them get thrown out 6 months after being found behind the couch. Legos are highly resealable and giftable and tradable. Hot Wheels last forever. Most toys have at least a possible second life, but party favors are crap. It's just crap. These party stores are really depressing too. It's just a building full of garbage made to be used for a few hours, and the kids themselves aren't even paying attention to it when they have it. They'd have more fun with a puddle and some sticks. You should stop buying saltwater fish if you aren't willing to put in the effort. And there are species that just can't be kept in captivity even with the effort. 90% of saltwater fish that you see in stores, except for most clowns, some tangs and some seahorses, and I think maybe cardinal fish as well, are all wild caught. More than any other pet, when you take home a saltwater fish, you've purchased a piece of the environment, and you should treat it with every bit of respect that it deserves. Glitter. Sparkles, glitter, and sequins on everything, especially kids' items. You think it's hard to get that crap out of your house after craft time? It's microplastic, and it's going into our waterways and oceans. Yet the toy stores and clothing stores are adding more sequins and glitter every day. It makes me furious. Just stop buying it. Tasty, tasty microplastic. It's fine, we're already full to the gills with it. What harm could a little more do? Clearly I'm being sarcastic here, folks. Don't buy this crap. Merchandise with the pink "For the Cure" bows. The company made big bucks by selling cancer-causing products and then covering it up, then turning around and keeping a lot of the bucks they collect as donations. I guess it would be more accurate to say that they knowingly promote instead of sell carcinogenic products and activities, such as fracking, which causes a rise in cancers that typically have environmental causes, such as chest cancer, and it suppresses new information about cancer-promoting chemicals like BPA. Detox teas or anything that claims to help rid you of toxins in your body. If you can't do that crap on your own already, then you need a kidney or liver transplant, not a tea that a fit mom is trying to sell you. Anything involved in a multi-level marketing or MLM scan. I'm looking at you, young living essential oils. Fun fact about MLMs. When they ask you to sign up 10 people to move up to the next level, there's something they're not telling you. If everyone has to sign up 10 people, in 10 cycles, you'd run out of people on planet Earth. The reason you hear about so many of them and know so few people in them is because most people are too smart to fall for them. Any kind of shower gel or face wash that has those plastic microbeads in them. The beads are small enough to get through most filtration systems and are ruinous to marine life. I thought those were banned a while ago. Oh my god. I mean, there's so many potential products, but just stop buying so much. You don't need all that frickin' crap. Stop it. Other people. This isn't a super salacious or flashy response, but nobody should be buying a boiler, furnace, or water heater below 90% efficiency. The 80% efficiency equipment is ancient technology, and you're throwing your money away while also spewing more greenhouse gases. Tiny plastic garbage. I see TikToks of people unboxing like these tiny mini plastic toys of name brand items, and they'll have hundreds of them all individually wrapped in multiple layers of packaging just to have tiny replicas of a little bottle of Windex or Lay's potato chips for some reason. Shark fin soup. The fishers only want the fin, and they throw the fish out to the sea after cutting it off since the other body parts have no monetary value, leaving the shark to die. How does the rest of the meat not have any demand? I believe shark meat in general is very high in mercury, meaning eating a lot of it is very bad for you. The real reason though is that the fins are just worth so much that taking up room with the actual whole shark just isn't cost effective. I cannot understand the people that buy holiday decor every single year. Are people buying fake trees and tossing them every year and needing a new one? Same thing with ornaments and whatnot. Obviously people move out of their parents or they need replacement ornaments if they've broken something, but the amount in stores just doesn't add up to me. Why so much new stuff every year? Our city has a spot to dump your real Christmas trees to be ground into mulch. Every year there are multiple trees on the pile, still fully decorated with lights, ornaments, and the whole thing. It always blows our minds how stupid people can be. Fast fashion. Cigarettes. Quit while you can, internet friends. Animals that are so inbred to meet a certain breed standard that they're a walking vet bill from birth. I'm a vet tech and I'm so sick of seeing inhumane traits bred into a lot of dogs. Brachycephalic dog breeds such as French bulldogs being an example. On top of that, golden retrievers have become cancer machines. Some of the worst skin and food allergy dogs that we treat are purebred poodles, and other purebred dog owners spend a couple of grand on them. Right now there's a 4-month-old doggo Argentino flown in from like Puerto Rico. Cost them at least 5 grand for that dog. He's bilateral cryptochid, and they keep asking what we can do for him so he can stud. And we keep explaining that even if he ends up not being sterile, cryptochidism is genetic and not something anyone should be breeding. The owner found a reproductive specialist that's supposedly a veterinarian who's willing to do a procedure to attempt testicular descent. I just can't even fathom any vet in their right mind being willing to do this. It should be classified as animal abuse. It's a serious welfare issue that needs to be addressed. K-cups. If you have a Keurig, use the reusable cup. The sewage that comes out of TV evangelists' mouths. As a Brit, visiting the US and seeing med adverts with endless warnings about side effects, followed by evangelist messages without any warnings, was crazy. Nestlé products. That's easier said than done when they own more than 200 brands. Yeah, they're kind of aware that half the planet knows that they're pure evil now, and they're good at squirreling their brand name into some tiny inconspicuous part of the packaging. That's kind of part of the problem. Microtransactions, especially in sports games. Cosmetics in a free-to-play game? I don't have a problem with that. You gotta make money somehow, and it doesn't affect gameplay. Blatant gambling and pay-to-win functionality in games like NBA 2K and Madden? Those can F right off. Oh, you think adult games are bad? Sweet Mother Judas are toddler and under 10 games worse. My wife downloaded a Hot Wheels game for my son for his Amazon Fire tablet. It's riddled with microtransactions and in-game ads that you can't skip trying to get kids to download the next game. It's not just toxic, it's freaking predatory. There need to be laws banning microtransactions in all formats of digital entertainment. I wouldn't have known about it either if he'd never handed it to me to help him build a tough puzzle track. They bury it so that you don't see it when you get the game from them. It's disgusting. A new phone every year. Who can afford to do this? New phones are like $1,100. My one's 7 years old. Any home exercise machine or equipment that requires a subscription to use. You paid 2 grand for a treadmill and then a recurring monthly fee to use it? How are people paying for this business model? Cricut just tried to pull this stunt. To use their required software to run the machine, they were going to start requiring a subscription fee even if you were using your own personal vectors that you designed. There was a huge blowback and they ended up rescinding it. For now, at least. Red Delicious apples. You deserve better than that mushy garbage. Get yourself a Honeycrisp. For a while, I genuinely just thought I kept getting bad Red Delicious apples. Turns out, they're all just awful. Please, uninstall Yelp from your phone. They're nothing more than extortionists that hold small businesses hostage to bad reviews. Real or fake, it doesn't matter. I can't express how crappy Yelp is as a company. Every time you open their app, you give them support. In short, F Yelp. Their salespeople are the worst. I added my tiny business on there, more so I could have another Google result rather than using it as a referral source in itself, and the next day I got a voicemail from their team who made it sound like there was something wrong with my business listing. I returned the call to see what needed to be fixed. He was then extremely pushy to have me pay to be one of the ads that you see at the top of Yelp searches. I said kindly, I'm starting small and focusing on a different area of advertising. He wouldn't let me get off the phone and had a really aggressive tone as the call went on. He told me my business would fail if nobody could find me on Yelp, and to have that happen, I needed the premium features. I had to hang up on him. It was so toxic and really got under my skin. And then I got all of these follow-up calls saying, there seems to be a disconnect between us. I'm really trying to help your business grow. Oh yeah? Then why do you have to harass people to help them? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Caskets, especially those sealed tight ones. Our dead need to decompose, and they will, but the casket can just explode. When I'm dead, I want to be buried in a blanket and tossed in a hole. Let nature worry about me. Plastic bottles. Just buy a water filter and fill up those same bottles. And for people saying just drink tap water, I agree 100%. I'm just saying that there are a lot of people who only buy bottled water, drink it, throw it, and buy another one. Ridiculously unnecessary. Those plastics are so difficult to recycle, if at all. Most just ends up in a landfill anyway. Trying to convince them to buy a water filter is a good middle ground. My father-in-law boasts about how eco-conscious he is, but still does what I've just complained about. It drives me mental. People need to stop scalping GPUs. I mean, you could have stopped at scalping. Individual plastic coffee packets like Keurig cups. Lots of plastic waste. Clothes. I know I don't need any more. I have way too many as it is, and yet I keep buying them, and I kinda hate myself for it. New clothes make me feel so good though. Have you tried thrifting? Less waste and way cheaper, plus you can donate them back again after you're done. Also, finding a piece that fits you and is your style is much more satisfying than picking one off a rack of identical shirts. Smack. People should definitely stop buying smack. This response was brought to you by Crystal. Anything that an influencer gets paid to promote. Diamonds. Then how will my wife know that I love her? Products with palm oil in them. People need to stop buying anything they don't need. Most products create a want and then fill it, and the only purpose of the product is to take money from you and give it to the distributors. I go to estate sales all the time and I see tons of crap that people buy and then never use. You do not need the latest version of a Vegematic. You will never use a slap chopper. The set and forget rotisserie will be used to cook one chicken and then it will go in your basement to be set down and forgotten. That one chicken cost you a lot to cook. You do not need a snow globe from the gift shop to commemorate your trip to the world's biggest ball of twine. It's true that a lot of people make a living making, selling, and shipping this stuff, but they need to retool and just make useful things. Madden. Seriously, basically anything that comes from EA. They've just gotten a bit too greedy for my liking. Things that don't actually offer them joy. So many people just buy crap to feel a temporary high that quickly wears off. University books. Boycott them. Ridiculous price for individuals to pay for education. They should all be online publicly for free. Yeah, there's a fine line to walk between good reference materials that you can get a lot of use out of, and the stuff that's literally just a different edition of the same book every year with 1 or 2 sentences difference. Often you can just get these things in your uni library, if it's the latter. Reddit coins. Products from scalpers. Everyone who buys from them is a huge part of the problem. Plastic bags. My father's village is drowning in plastic bags. They're everywhere. Sometimes they melt in the sun, and I don't even want to know what the consequences are for the environment. Fantasy books that are first in a series of 13. Fantasy has become completely entrenched in this model where every story has to be a massive multi-volume epic. I can count on one hand the number of multi-volume series that actually needed to be 8 to 10 books long. Most of them could have been told in one trilogy, if not just one epic book. I 100% believe that writers are pressured to stretch out their 2-volume stories into 8 purely for the additional sales. Fruits and vegetables that are already cut and packaged in plastic. Mother Nature already produced the best natural packaging. Fast fashion, and I might be a hypocrite, because these big companies do not give a fork about workers. Second-hand stuff is the way to go if you want a mainstream brand. Ethical brands are another option, with second-hand ethical brands being the ideal choice. Single-use plastics. Crap toys that you buy at the dollar store. All they are is junk to fill up a landfill. It was nice during COVID when we were producing products that we needed and not all this junk crap that you can see everywhere. Generally speaking, wild-caught animals as pets. I had to go to the pet store today to buy some supplies and I was utterly horrified. Cages of wild-caught lizards, snakes, turtles, frogs and salamanders, many piled on top of each other and writhing around trying to escape. They all look sick and stressed and they're being sold at impulse buy prices. Unfortunately, none of the species I saw have a protected status in this state, and all are considered fair game. But that doesn't make it right. I can guarantee that 90% of the customers in that shop have no idea how to take care of these creatures, and the remaining 10% who do know better than to support their ongoing mass collection. Unless you work for a professional conservation facility or animal rehab center, please leave wild animals in the wild. Flushable wipes. They're actually not flushable and they're bad for your drain system. Giant SUVs and trucks that people don't need. It's one thing if you actually use the capacity regularly, but just to drive to groceries and to work, it's such a massive waste. Bottled water. Foie gras. It made me sick watching a video of a duck being force-fed. Those weird little disability or sickness awareness things like mugs, shirts, and so on. Speaking as a disabled person, not only is it insulting to have the very thing that's been plaguing us stamped on a cute little kid's cup, but it's also a needless waste of resources and money making those items that'll probably be used for a day at most. If people really care, just donate. It's better for the environment and it'll have more of an impact because less is used to make the items. Anything labeled homeopathic or naturopathic or anything like that. It's all pseudoscientific crap. If you are a normal, working-class person, you do not need to pay for tax services. Governments and financial institutions, like your bank, provide free software that you can use to file your taxes. Remember that it's a tax return that you're getting, not some bonus reward, so if you don't have to, it doesn't make sense to pay to get your own money back. Anything that is associated with the trash that is the Kardashian family. The latest phones and electronics. Electronic waste is an insanely big problem, especially in the countries that process, burn, the waste to get the precious metals from them. There is literally nothing wrong with your phone. You only got it less than a year ago. You don't need the latest model. Stop it. Live, love, laugh signs. Everyone in my family has one. This is not a happy house, Janet. All Nestle products. Their board are like real-life villains. Decimating the environment, child slavery, super violent, and their products suck anyway. Screw Nestle. Dryer sheets. Single use, they just contribute to your waste output and they make your towels less fluffy. Also, dryer sheets contain a potentially harmful chemical called quaternary ammonium compounds. According to Geller, at the very least it's been known to cause or worsen asthma and skin irritations. You can buy reusable wool dryer balls instead that naturally fluff up your clothes. Helium-filled balloons. Helium is a finite element and we're piddling it away in birthday balloons. Yep, it is absolutely wild that for a while the main visible use of this valuable element was just to hold up our brightly colored party baubles. Nuts. Glide floss. My oral hygienist pointed out that studies have linked the use of this floss with elevated levels of toxic chemicals in the body. Plus, this kind of floss can be too abrasive in the gums, leading to infection and gum recession. Thick, soft-threaded floss is the way to go. Helium balloons. There are so many medical and technical processes which require helium, and it can't be lab-created. It's mined, or extracted might be the right term, and it will eventually run out if things don't change. Single-use water bottles. I've got friends who buy 24 packs every fortnight and drink out of them. It's just literally so bad for the environment. I have a real issue with long-term storage units for most people. I understand that storage units have some value if you're in a situation where you're moving but have a gap without a permanent place to stay, or if you're going to be traveling for a few months or a year and get out of your current rental as examples of good uses of these places, but I know tons of people who have a whole house or apartment and then rent a storage unit as well for years, and I find it completely baffling. Storage units aren't cheap, but most of what gets stored in them often is. It often works out in my mind that by the time you've paid to store it long enough to actually use it or move it to its final resting place, you could frequently have bought the contents of the storage units several times over. Amazon.com. F the way they treat people. I read an article where instead of buying air conditioning and paying for the extra electricity, Amazon hired EMTs at their warehouse because it was cheaper in extreme heat. Who the F thinks like that? Rags. People actually buy rags to clean with. That's what old clothes are for. That's why they're called rags. Kitchen unitaskers. If I can only use it for one ingredient and I can do that task better with anything else in my kitchen, then it's not worth your time. Thanks, Aunt Becky, but I don't need a watermelon slicer, rollie, or avocado knife. The main thing that comes to mind for me is batteries. I paid for some decent rechargeable batteries back at the start of 2015 as I was going through one AAA battery pack a week, and it honestly saved so much money and waste. I've literally just recycled 2 last month, the first 2 to die in 6 years. The other thing that stands out for me is Samsung products. I feel their quality control has declined over the last few years, and I've totally lost faith in their products. The S4, S5, Tab S2 have all had battery and software issues, and the A70 had a USB-C subboard module issue. I've had 3 repaired with the same issue. And the Tab E had a SIM card or microSD card slot issue. The only one I haven't had software issues with was the A70, but saying that, the repairs were naff. Anything from Wish. Dogs and cats. There are plenty in shelters that need adopting, and they're not inbred puppy mill dogs. Almonds. What an environmental disaster they are. So Chidi from The Good Place was right? What is the most blatant lie that a salesperson told when trying to make a sale? My grandma was told she should get a faster internet subscription because she lived on a hill and the electrons struggled to get up to her. I asked a hot dog vendor in New York City how to find the subway. Then I tried to purchase a Pepsi. Knowing that I was a tourist, he asked for $5. I said, "The sign says $2.50. And he says, "Oh, that's for the warm ones. This one's cold, so it's $5. At a market in Mexico, I asked, "Hey, what's this thing made out of? Wool?" Salesperson said, "Yes, of course." "Oh, I'm allergic to wool." "Oh, it's not wool." The similar thing happened to me in China. The salesperson said, "This is carved out of real elephant tusk. That's why it's so expensive." I said, "Oh, that's terrible. The poor elephant." Salesperson then switches tack. "Oh, just kidding. It's hard plastic. $10 and it's yours." "Oh, those are disposable flash drives for $4. They really only work a couple of times. What you really want is one of the competitors' drives for $15. Talking to a D-Link representative on the phone. They go, "Yeah, what you need to do is update the firmware on your router, but for us to install the update for you, we'll have to charge you for the service." I said, "Oh, okay, I just found the update on your website. I just have to download and install it, right? I can do that myself." No, if you do that without our help, you could destroy your router. With the file from your website, following the directions from your website. Yes. This random guy in a van outside my house trying to sell steaks. "Hey dude, you live here?" Yeah, what do you need?" "I have a bunch of leftover meat and I need to get rid of it. You can just have it for free." "Oh sure, come on in." He enters the house. "Okay, here's our prices." "I thought you said it was free." "Well, at these prices, it's practically free. Get out." You should really be careful about letting strangers into your home, no matter how tasty their meat is. Some of them just want to get a peek inside in case they want to break in later. The last commenter raises a valid point. We should be as careful in our choice of hookups as we are with shifty guys offering to give us free quality goods, no matter the size, juiciness, and girth of their meat. When convincing my grandmother to buy boots for a 2-year-old in advance, the saleswoman said that by next year, no store whatsoever is going to be selling baby shoes, and they'll be impossible to find. I should mention that I was in the store with her, which means this wasn't a matter of misinterpretation. She just blatantly told us that baby clothing stores were closing and shoes would not be sold anywhere. Also, my grandmother is not a native English speaker, which could be why the woman was trying to scam her. This car saleswoman tried to sell me on an option that, and I quote, "the Canadian Navy uses to prevent rust on their ships." I'm in the Canadian Navy, and no, we don't. The look on her face was almost worth paying more though. Another Canadian Navy guy here. I brought a new cell phone from Bell and they threw in a screen protector that the salesman described as military grade. I laughed and joked to my wife that this meant it would be low quality and probably fall off within a week. Joke was on me. It fell off within a day. A kid I work with told a customer a certain bike was really strong because of its tectonic plates. I was having my laser eye surgery consultation, and the salesman told me that the surgeon who specializes in my type of eye was in town for the next week, so I had to be quick. The worst part is that I believed him at first. So yeah, I went elsewhere and got the surgery, not because he lied, just because it was cheaper elsewhere. But I found out something about the whole process that some probably don't know. There really is no fixed price for laser eye surgery. They charge you exactly what they think you can or will pay. One of the first things they ask at the consultation is how much you have to spend on it. Not exactly a lie, but a salesman once tried to sell a set of knives. His selling point was, they contain ions. His sales target was my chemistry teacher. Nobody buys laptops anymore, they're outdated, a Best Buy employee said, trying their hardest to sell me a tablet. I told a Toyota salesman that I'd narrowed my choices to either the Toyota Camry or Honda Accord. He started telling me about how smooth the Camry's ride was, and then proceeded to tell me with great concern for my personal well-being that the ride of the Honda Accord was so rough that it could lead to internal bleeding. And the cheapest HDMI cable we have is $30, but you don't want that one. It won't get the signal to the TV. You need one of these $60 cables over here. Best Buy, one of the many, many reasons that I don't shop there anymore. I had Skyrim pre-ordered at EB Games Canada, and I went in to cancel it and get a refund so that I could buy it on Steam. And this girl tried to convince me that Steam was shutting down soon in order to get the game from them for like $18 more. When I was a kid in the 80s, I distinctly remember a Sears salesman's pitch about a microwave. This was the early 80s, and not a lot of people had them. He told my parents that you could put a piece of apple pie in the microwave with the ice cream on top, and it would heat up the pie without heating up the ice cream. Bull crap. This college salesman at Fry's Electronics, who looked only a year or two older than I, tried to sell me one of the lower-tier laptops of one of Lenovo's newest lineups. I was trying to buy the best one from last year's lineup, the price of which had dropped dramatically since the newer lineup was released. The one I was trying to buy had better specs all round and was cheaper. The employee tried to convince me that Blu-rays look better on the other 720p screen than on my model's 1080p. Customers who bought my model returned it and complained about its screen. Also that I shouldn't buy the model I wanted with the graphics card because it's not worth the electricity that it will drain up. Objective. That the newer model has a faster processor because how they arranged the circuits. Research I did before shopping showed that both processor models were the same, but in-store one chip was marked with an M. And after he knew he wouldn't change my mind, he said that the one that I wanted was out of stock. I called bullcrap and later asked another employee who said that they had two left. By the way, this was considered bait and switch, which is fraud. I told them that employee X had said it was out of stock, and they made him bring me what I wanted from the back. F employee X. Don't worry, this will last you a lifetime. You need to buy an Apple display for your MacBook Pro. They aren't compatible with all these myriad displays on the shelves right here, said a Best Buy employee. Around 2003 at Best Buy, my sister was about to buy a computer. The sales rep said that if she didn't buy and install Norton Antivirus, about $80 at the time, that her computer would run 50% slower. I laughed and told him to his face that was bullcrap, and then we left. You know, guys, I'm beginning to get the vague idea that Best Buy may not in fact be the best place to buy. Granted, some of these stories are a little older, but I'm curious about whether their modern salesmen have the same reputation for blatantly lying the way some of the ones in our stories do. Any recent encounters you guys want to share in the comments? I had someone press my doorbell. I reminded them of the "No Canvassers" sign below my doorbell, to which she replied, "It's okay, I'm not here to sell you a painting." Here in the southern US, it's a "No Solicitors" sign with an additional handwritten sign that says, "That includes religion." I'm not hating on religion, but we get so many door-to-door people here, and I don't want to deal with them the same way I don't want to deal with someone trying to sell me a vacuum cleaner or a newspaper subscription. This wristband releases positive/negative ions to counter the negative/positive ions in your body and make you stronger. I was given both versions of the positive or negative by different people selling. Fake power balance wristbands. To clarify, the people that I found were not selling the bracelets branded as Power Balance, but another imitation of that. I even had a look on the Power Balance website and they mentioned about imitation Power Balance bracelets being sold. Scammers hating on scammers. This car is pulling to the left a little bit. Oh, that's in case you fall asleep at the wheel. The car will steer itself towards the median rather than off the side of the road. Oh good, I've always liked safety features designed to cause head-on collisions. Bro, these HDMI cables are a new release from Japan. They apparently transfer 100% of the image without losing any detail, meaning your DVDs will look like Blu-rays. I had the following exchange with the last car salesman that I dealt with. As you can see, it has nitrogen-filled tires. You know what that does, right? Not a whole hell of a lot in practice? Oh no, it does. You know how with an air-filled tire you can get a blowout? That's the oxygen inside actually exploding. With nitrogen, you don't have that problem. That's not even a little true. Oh, we don't have any of those. We have these things that are 10 times more expensive. Yes, we do, because I work in the warehouse for this company. I worked at a restaurant one time and my manager told all the service staff we were out of all the cheap wines in a ploy to get us to sell the more expensive stuff. It's entirely possible this store had an equally D-bag manager. You know what's not good for sales? Telling customers you're out of everything they try to order all night, thinking they'll buy something more expensive. Instead, everyone just skipped the wine and we lost out on what would have been sales. I watched a guy a few days ago try to sell a kid more drum heads than he needed. You know, you need to replace your bottom heads just as often as you replace the top heads, or you'll never be able to tune them. They might not tune to professional quality, but that doesn't mean you have to drop $80 every few weeks on them. And on a bit of a tangent, I hate when places advertise something for cheap to get you in the door, don't stock it, and then try to upsell you on a similar item. Yeah, we're out of that $250 laptop, but this $1,200 gaming laptop is just what your grandmother needs to surf the internet. It drives me up the wall. You get what you pay for. He was trying to sell me a $200 HDMI cable. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My recruiter told 17-year-old me that my unit would never get deployed. We did. I was here to say this exact same thing. First pep talk in boot camp was, "Your recruiter was a lying piece of crap. Welcome to the military." So true. While I was in basic, I heard a story about some guy being told by his recruiter that they don't shave heads anymore. At Best Buy. Of course this Nikon lens will go right with your Canon body, no problem. Most camera equipment is universal. I had to tell him, no, you're wrong. I bought a pretty expensive vacuum cleaner from a home goods store, and when I got it home and tried it out, it made this ear-piercing whistling noise. I brought it back to return it, and the salesman, trying to keep the sale, told me that all high-end vacuum cleaners made that sound. That's how you knew it was moving air at maximum power. I got my money back, he lost his commission, and I went elsewhere. After botching the install of a side mirror which caused the window to leak, the dealership told me that my car wasn't designed for high-pressure car washes. I told him that was bullcrap, but he kept calling me little lady, so I bolted. I had my dad call as a last resort, and lo and behold, they fixed the window seal properly. When I was buying a car, one salesman at a used car shop blatantly told me that I'm not allowed to test drive any cars before I buy them because it's against insurance laws. Right. They told me that they actually owned the furniture they were selling to me. I paid for furniture at a furniture store. I was promised it would be delivered from the warehouse in a week. The floor models were just the demo. I came to find out they were in the process of bankrupting when I made my purchase. All the employees knew this, but they wanted to get any commission on sales that they could. Another liquidation company already owned everything. To get our money back, we had to fight the charge with the credit card company. Ended up getting every cent back, luckily. I was at a crappy car dealership looking at an older Jeep Wrangler. It was a 4-cylinder, and I was looking for an inline 6. The sales guy told me he could sell me a conversion kit to add 2 cylinders to the engine. Now, I'm not trying to sell you anything, but you know, we were actually told to say this in the narrator's one door-to-door sales job, and even though on some level it was true because we were subscribing them to a service, I mean, it's still deceptive. We're taking away their money. I'm glad I sucked at that job. Oh, Windows 8 has no bugs because it's based on older versions, unlike the previous Windows operating systems. said the Best Buy employee managing the computer department. It's been proven to cure cancer, some lady trying to sell me some ointment. We integrate seamlessly with Outlook. I record all calls I make, and after we'd purchased said product and were trying to implement the Outlook integration, I called their support team only to find out that they, in the future, planned to make Outlook integration a thing. It was not something they offered now. So I got my panties in a bunch and I called the sales guy who claimed he never said that. Got a manager on the line who said he never would have said that. I must have misheard or misunderstood. I told them I'd recorded all the calls, with their permission, and I'd be reviewing my recordings to confirm if I'd misheard. And they were like, yeah, you do that. So I called them the next day and played them the recording of him explaining in detail just how great the Outlook integration currently was definitely available at the level of service we were paying for, and that if we had any issues, their support would love to help us out. So they were like, fine, sue us. So we did. It was excellent. They settled, so it didn't go to court or anything, but it was really satisfying. Also, don't mess with me when I say I record calls. I am not crapping you, and I will look that crap up. The woman who took her clothes off for money said, I really like you. You're different from the other guys that come in here. Plot twist, I'm that woman. At the vet's with my dog, his wife is trying to sell me this super expensive dog food. I'd already taken a sample home and fed some to my dog, but she didn't really like it, so I told her that. Her response was that dogs have no taste buds. I just looked at her with a mix of surprise and disgust, and I walked out without a word. Oh, that's not a pyramid, that's a multi-level market. I was invited out to a job interview one time. The first part of it was an orientation in a rented warehouse district office, where they spent the first half an hour or more explaining with a slideshow how they weren't a pyramid scheme and what they were doing was totally legal. Yep, thanks, bye, don't call me again. If you get the gold-plated cables, they'll protect your TV from getting viruses. I work for a satellite TV company and I get free service. So I said to a Comcast caller, I get my TV service for free. Only way I'd switch is if you paid me to use your service. Can you do that? The agent said, yes, we can. Alright, have a good day, bye. That Norton Antivirus is an excellent program, when in reality it's a goddamn virus itself. In Best Buy, they told me that if I didn't get the additional $30 charger for my iPod, the included USB charger would shorten my iPod's battery life with each use. Lies! She didn't really lie, but did a bad job of selling me something. I was going into a store looking for some boots, and I asked her for them in a size 9, and she straight up tells me, oh, so you can try them here and buy them online? I was like, no, I might want to buy them here. Then when I do try the boots on, she starts telling me the shoes I came in with were complete crap and low quality. At this point, I'm like, what the frick? You unappreciative idiot. Tell me where on the internet you can go and have people crap on you for what you're wearing while you're just trying to buy something nice for yourself. Can you get this experience anywhere else, huh? Real estate agent tried to tell me that the house I was looking at wasn't on a slab. I was like, okay, show me the basement. Fricking idiot. I was at Best Buy with my grandmother helping her purchase a laptop. The person who was following us around, trying to sell us on computers and software, had something to say about everything I suggested to my grandma. I'm not incredibly educated with laptops, but I know that my grandma wanted a basic computer for internet, email and stuff, so I found a Toshiba for around $350 that was perfect for her. And he said, Toshibas are known for getting viruses and freezing up. I suggest this $600 HP. I said, no, my grandma isn't paying $600 for a laptop she doesn't need. She wants basic. This is basic. She doesn't want a bunch of added crap. She sided with me and got the Toshiba. Then he tried selling her an antivirus. Norton is the best and most reliable when it comes to protecting your computer. And at $80 a year, you're getting such a deal. Screw that. I told my grandma I'll get her an antivirus at the low cost of her famous homemade chili. 1.5 years with that Toshiba and Microsoft Security Essentials, and she's had no problems. In short, screw the rude employees at Best Buy. Enlarge your member in just 3 weeks. It took 6 weeks, the liars. Some portly gentleman once sold me a chocolate bar and told me it would keep my face from getting any uglier. In retrospect, I think he was lying. Sadly, it took the narrator several days after he found the answers for this script to determine that this was in fact a SpongeBob reference and not a real-life story. I've been down a deep YouTube rabbit hole trying to work out the context after people replied to this initial comment with a whole bunch of obscure remarks about the chocolate also bringing world peace or rubbing it on their face to make them live forever. Oh, internet. Oh, these bright blue pants look really good on you. I'm a straight male and she was lying. They look fabulous on me. My refrigerator died, so I went to Lowe's looking for a new one. My wife and I found a model we liked and started talking to the floor rep about it. We ended up buying it and he started trying the typical upsell for the warranty. One of the features of the warranty was that if the fridge died, Lowe's would compensate you for up to $200 worth of food. That sounded like a pretty good deal, since my daughter has food allergies and we have to shop at Whole Foods a lot, so it gets expensive. I started focusing on that and asked what would happen if the entire neighborhood lost power for a few days. Oh, Lowe's will still compensate you. So you're telling me that if the fridge still works fine but the power lines are down or something, that Lowe's will still compensate me for up to $200? Yep. Even though the fridge itself didn't break but it was the fault of the power company? Yep. It's a good deal, right? That is a good deal. I'll take the warranty. A year later we had a snowstorm and the power was out for 3 days. Lowe's refused to compensate us. My wife and I spent several hours on the phone with the service reps, and they said that's not part of the warranty and that the sales reps know better than to say something like that. We called the original store and we were told the exact same thing. In short, a Lowe's sales rep lied to my wife and I to get us to buy a warranty for a refrigerator. I refuse to shop at Lowe's anymore because of that. Anyone from Lowe's, if you're reading this, we're about to buy a new oven, microwave, and dishwasher. I just got done remodeling my kitchen and bought everything from Home Depot. And to all the people telling me I'm an idiot, I already know that. I was out of food money and several hours of my day. If you're not going to contribute something worthwhile, please just save your breath. Today I learned that all Best Buy employees are blatant liars. At guitar centers, some of the teenage drummers try to bullcrap me, thinking I'm just another starting drummer who doesn't know a flam from a floor tom. I know my crap when it comes to drums. I was in looking for a new drum set, seeing as I was upgrading from my starter set and I wanted a quality one. While I was looking around, one of the drum salesmen asked if he could help me, to which I replied no. He left me alone for a good 10 minutes until he came up again and started looking over my shoulder to see what I was looking at. It was a Gretsch Renown set that had maple wood. After a second he says, "Yeah, maple is good wood, but honestly the wood doesn't matter. I like birch because it doesn't warp as bad when you spill water on it, and it's a much more rich natural sound." I literally walked out after hearing that and I've never been back. There are so many things wrong with that statement that I can't support a place that hired people to spew garbage like that kid was. What made adoptive parents return their new child? I had a neighbor named Melissa. She was about my age, like 8, and her brother was slightly older, Giovanni. I remember when they moved in because her baby brother was named Kermit and I thought that was extremely bizarre. She was eccentric, to say the least. My mum let her come over pretty much whenever she wanted during the summer because she always seemed to be ignored by her parents. Giovanni used to come over too, but I remember he'd leave a lot to go run errands with his parents or for dinner. Whenever I asked her if she had to go, she said she couldn't eat what they could or go with them anywhere. They basically shushed her out of the house. It was concerning, so I told my parents. My mum tried making friends with her mum several times, but the woman was just cold. Anyway, turns out Melissa was adopted. I'm not sure how my mum found out, but I remember coming home from school one day and Melissa just wasn't there. She normally waited outside of my house. A week or more went by, still didn't come over. Our neighborhood was very gossipy, but someone found out they gave her back because she was chatty and they originally just wanted all boys. Her family moved out shortly after this. I have an ex-girlfriend, let's call her Rosie. Around 2008, when we were both 14, both her and her infant sister were in foster care. Shortly into our relationship, a couple with a 6-year-old boy decided they wanted another child, but didn't want to undergo childbirth again. So what they did was adopt her sister and give Rosie a short time to live with them as a foster child to see if she'd fit into the family. Understandable. They kept her for around 2 weeks and then said no because their biological son wanted to be the oldest. Now she hasn't got to see her sister in 2 years. I hate that family. She only had to be there for 4 years, if that, and to let a 6-year-old's reasoning keep you from keeping 2 sisters together and then not letting one see the other is just sick. My cousin was adopted twice. Her first adoptive family decided that they just didn't want to be parents anymore after having her for 3 years. She was friends with my cousin, so my aunt took her in and adopted her. She's all grown up now and a beautiful, happy woman. My parents joke all the time that they're going to return me. Joke's on them, I'm 30 now, but really my parents love me, and I've never ever seen them as anything but my mum and dad. Though my dad said the other day that if I get a DNA test and I'm not 100% Korean, he wants his money back. He paid for a Korean and he wants a Korean, not a hybrid. From what I've read, this happens more commonly with children adopted from Russia. People want white kids. They get white kids with fetal alcohol syndrome, profound socialization problems, and disabilities. They're kids who require a tremendous amount of therapy, patience, time, and money. I don't know if it's still an issue, but in the 80s and 90s it was in the news. People would put toddlers alone on flights back to Russia. Jesus Christ, I don't know what annoys me more. People being picky about the ethnicity of their adopted children, or the fact that they don't do their research and just dump them if they aren't easy to raise. I guess adoptive parents can be just as crappy as regular ones. Trigger warnings on some pretty sad subject matter and mental illness going forward. Yep, my aunt and uncle went to Russia to adopt a 3-year-old boy. They ended up also bringing home an infant girl. After a few weeks with the kids at home, they were starting to tell the family they were going to return the little boy because he was too much work for them. Cue the family backlash and everyone stepping up to take the boy instead of him going back to Russia. And I think they felt pressured to keep him, which they did. It's very clear that my aunt still resents the heck out of him, though. She does not like him at all. I used to work in children's services and knew a few kids who were returned. I actually agreed with the parents in some of those cases. In a couple of cases, the parents really shouldn't have adopted a kid that was known to be troubled. One boy's family decided to return him to the care of the state when one day they came home to find he'd shattered the toilet with a hammer and was caught mistreating the family dog. He also creeped out the couple's teenage daughter to the point where she was threatening to run away to get away from him. To our knowledge, he never managed to actually do anything to her. I knew of a few others, but that one stood out the most. Bear in mind that I also worked with very disturbed boys, so I didn't meet the kids that were returned because the parents were bad. One of the sadder ones to me was a kid who'd been raised wrong in every way possible, and a kind but very naive couple who adopted him. They didn't listen to any advice we tried to give them because they knew that love conquers all, and they figured that if they were just nice enough, he'd be all better in a few months or maybe 1 year. They thought that at the end, after 2 years, he'd be a normal kid. They weren't prepared for his baggage at all. My understanding was that he did get a little better after some years with them, but after a while they just gave up and gave him back. It destroyed him and any progress he'd made vanished. I have a friend who was adopted from Russia, and aside from being a little behind in school, he was a normal kid. His parents couldn't have children, so they flew to Russia to adopt a 4-year-old girl, him, 2 years old, and his biological sister, 3 years old. Well, when they got to the care facility, they got to pick up all the kids, who were all in separate rooms. They get my friend and his non-biological sister, but for some reason they won't let him see the biological sister. The parents spend the night there, expecting that the next morning they'll get to see their daughter. Finally, the caretakers bring them to the little girl. When the girl saw them, she started throwing her toys, punching people, screaming, pulling her hair out, and just going crazy. So they decided not to adopt her. The mother told me she now regrets it. She believes the orphanage told the girl to act that way because another family might have offered more money. The whole trip was just suspicious, she told me, and that if she had a choice, she would have demanded to adopt her anyways. Oh my god, and I just remembered another family who gave up their daughter. I went to elementary school with this quiet kid named Daniel. He had really bad speech problems, but the only thing I ever heard him say clearly was how excited he was about his new adopted sister. Now honestly, I didn't like Daniel, he was annoying and he smelled bad. But my friend, let's call her Kathy, was his best friend. They spent all their time together and she regularly visited the house. In the beginnings of the 4th grade, Daniel's family adopted this adorable little girl. She was really shy and couldn't speak English. Halfway through our 4th grade year though, Daniel just stops coming to school. I talked to Kathy and she told me that his family wouldn't answer the phone. Kathy and her mother eventually go to Daniel's house to see what's up. His mom tells them they returned their daughter because she was trouble and too immature. Daniel and his family moved away after that. I have no idea why they would have given up their 4-year-old daughter. I know adoptive children have a tendency to have issues, but giving up a tiny child who needs your help just sounds so selfish. I was adopted when I was 10. I wasn't given back, but it was almost hell. I just came to say that you need to be a really caring person if you're going to adopt any kid older than a baby. I was ripped from my family and thrown in with a woman who thought to completely change me instead of accepting me for who I was. I got PTSD from the day I was given to my adoptive family, severe self-hatred because I've never lived up to the standards set by my adoptive mother, and crazy attachment issues. If I just had someone adopt me who could have just said, hey, that stuff was messed up, so we know you're going to need a lot of time to adjust, and that's cool. We're here for you. At 10 years old, you're already getting a sense of who you are, so we can't really change that. We can only guide you out of trouble the best we can. You don't have to call us mum or dad, you already have those. We're not here to replace them. We're here to give you the stability that they couldn't. But the damage is done. I'm 27, I've got almost 2 decades of pent-up crap I now have to get rid of. So if you're going to adopt an older kid, don't expect them to be grateful. Don't expect them to love you right away. Don't expect them to be perfect. They'll argue. They'll get in trouble. They'll scream at you that you're not their real parents. Take it all in your stride and don't overreact. This is their process for adjusting. This is what you signed up for. My adoptive mother, when we'd get into arguments, would yell at me. Fine, do you want to go back and live with your father? And that cut like a knife. This was the first home I'd ever been in for longer than 2 years since I was born. She threatened to take away the only place I'd ever had any stability. Don't ever do that to a kid. You have no idea the kind of damage you can inflict on a child doing that. My roommate in college was born in South America, Venezuela, I believe. There was an incident shortly after birth that left her blind. She was put up for adoption, I don't know if that had anything to do with her being blind, and was later adopted by an American family. The family put her through surgery to correct her vision problem. When the doctors told them that they were unable to fix her problem and it likely couldn't be fixed, they put her up for adoption again. She was later adopted by a woman who herself was blind, so I guess things kinda worked out. The lady that moved into my family's old home had adopted a child that was deaf. She was told that the baby was totally healthy and had passed all the tests. She kept the baby, but sued the adoption agency. When I last saw the kid, he was 5 and he seemed pretty happy. I mean, I'm glad at least that the latter of this pair kept the kid and took steps to ensure that the agency would disclose things better in the future. But on the other hand, would she have adopted if she'd known this in the first place? I mean, I hope so. This is going to be one of those sad videos, folks, if you hadn't worked that out already. My chemistry teacher in high school did this. She was unable to bear children for whatever reason, so she looked into adoption. She was obviously very excited and shared the news with her students. There was a very young mother, like a pregnant teenager, who was looking to give her child to her. After she was born, she brought in pictures of her new daughter to class, and we spent the first couple of minutes sharing that moment before we returned to balancing equations and other chemistry stuff. Well, it turns out that in the adoption process, the birth mother has something like 60 days to change her mind and null the contract and ask for her child back, something which both parties sign off on. On day 59, the birth mother changes her mind, insists that she wants her kid now, so my teacher had to return her daughter. The next day, she came to school as composed as one can be after such a traumatic event, but we could all tell she had obviously been crying before she started her lecture, and barely made it through the period without breaking down and running away in class. I don't want to vilify the birth mother too much, but she really did wait until almost the last minute to change her mind, and my teacher surely thought this was all but a done deal. I can't imagine the heartbreak at returning home to an empty crib. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This happened to a girl I knew. She was born, left up for adoption, adopted for a year, returned, and adopted again. When her second adopted parents told the story 20 years later, she decided that she didn't want to be alive anymore. Pretty bloody sad. As an adopted child, I believe that most parents who adopt have zero desire to return their child, as you put it. My mother was told by several doctors that as a result of childhood polio, she'd be unable to have children. 3 years after they adopted me, they had my brother. Still no refunds. When I was in middle school, some family friends adopted a boy a year or so younger than me. They already had 3 biological kids of their own, one of which was a girl a little older than me. They ended up quietly returning him after caring for him for about 8 months. He was in therapy but often threatened to burn the house down, to do terrible things to his siblings, and frequently stole and hurt the family pets. Some days he had days when he'd be completely kind and caring, and others when he tried to kill the cat. I guess they were put in a position of putting their other kids at risk by keeping him. I know the mum still wonders if they could have done things differently. A cousin of mine and his wife adopted a baby when I was about 4. The agency they went through told them he was a perfectly healthy, normal baby. When they got him home, he screamed constantly. Not just cried, he screamed. That's the only thing I remember about him. Turns out the baby was born without a brain. He had only a brain stem. The agency knew this all along and admitted it when they were confronted about charging them an arm and a leg and not disclosing the proper information. So the agency said, "Fine, give him back and we'll give you a different one." After a lot of thought, they decided that that was the best option for them, since the child they were originally given really would never develop to have any kind of normal life. To this day, certain relatives think that giving the original baby back was wrong, but I think they might have made the right choice. Wow, can people really do all this stuff? I thought if you adopted a child, it was yours. Not like a t-shirt that doesn't fit right, so you take it back for a refund or exchange. Isn't there some kind of matching process for people who are adopting kids? My aunt and uncle adopted 3 girls from China. The 2 younger ones were adopted as infants, and since they were raised in a good home, they have no issues whatsoever, aside that we still don't know their correct ages. They're supposedly 10 and 14, but they look and behave much younger. However, the 3rd girl they adopted, at 13, she was in and out of several different homes. She has a disorder where she frequently takes things from people to try to hold on to them. After many attempts at therapy and rehabilitation, she was sent away to a school in Florida, which they're paying out of the wazoo for. It's specifically for girls with attachment disorder. It's very sad because they weren't allowed to see her as part of the therapy, and she's been in the school for about 2 years now. When I was little, my parents used to go to temple. There was a couple who adopted a 3-year-old boy, which is pretty old for adopting. He too was adopted from Russia. I grew up with that kid who always used to hang out with the older women, gossip with them, and was basically one of the ladies. When he was about 14, they just gave him back. No one ever knew why, but in my family we think that he came out of the closet and they just sent him away. That's awful, and I still think of him from time to time, imagining what his life might look like. I miss you, buddy. Jesus Christ. He was the kid you raised by the time he was 14. This is absolutely reprehensible on the part of these people, and they've probably caused greater hurt and trauma in him than if they'd never adopted him in the first place. I hope he got understanding fosters who at least let him be who he was and gave him a safe space, because I think he'd understandably have massive trust issues after that. My parents adopted twice in the early 80s. Back then, you didn't know anything about the background of the child, nor was there any training for the adoptive family or any support services following the adoption. We adopted a 4-year-old boy, and all was good for a few months. Then his real colors started to show. He was violent and combative to the points of physically attacking my mother. Now we know he had something like combative detachment disorder. After 4 years of tears, prayers, and effort, his birth grandparents re-adopted him. During the same time, we adopted a 9-month-old girl who we now know was a smack baby. She has a list of 3- and 4-letter problems that would fill a sheet of paper. Physical problems, mental issues, and lots of emotional problems. Most notably, RAD, or reactive attachment disorder, which means she's incapable of accepting and returning affection. By the time she was in middle school, I, her older brother, was having to physically restrain her from attacking my mum. We all locked our doors in our sleep due to nightly death threats, and anything that could be used as a weapon had to be locked up. Once she got large enough, my mum had to call the police several times to get her to calm down, and eventually my parents put her in a private girls' home. The money to pay for my college went to pay for her care, and when she turned 18, she signed herself out and isn't doing well whenever we try to get in touch. I'm incredibly bitter at the system that didn't prepare my family for what we were getting into, or at least provide help after the fact. I've had years of therapy to deal with my emotional damage, and I still regularly have nightmares of either of those kids murdering my parents. Sadder, though, is what it did to my parents. They're still heartbroken and think that they somehow failed these kids. Sadder still, these kids could have had a much better chance if the adoptive services would have been more thorough. In short, my family adopted 2 messed up kids and didn't know they were messed up. One was readopted by his grandparents, and the other is an addict working girl now that she's grown up. I'll tell the story on behalf of my mum. She adopted the 2 children of a childhood friend. I was a toddler and she was pregnant with my birth sister, but she adopted a 6-year-old boy and infant girl. My mum had lived in foster care and wanted to help these kids avoid it. Both of them were diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, or the Russian orphan disorder, probably because their mothers had a severe substance problem. The mother would leave my brother sleeping in the car while she took off her clothes for money. My sister exhibited withdrawal symptoms until she was 6 months old. Stuff like that. My mum kept my brother for a year and my sister for 7 years before putting them up for readoption through a private agency. My brother dislocated a younger kid's arm, and my sister was expelled from kindergarten and had a fascination with her own poop, and they both experimented with fire. Lots of inpatient and outpatient therapy just didn't seem to help. My dad moved out. My mum was a single parent with 2 other small children. She gave my adopted siblings up. It took me years to forgive my mum. I know she did what she thought was best, and she really tried. My brother was adopted by a cool couple that did him a lot of good. My sister was adopted by hardcore Christians who cut off contact with us. Honestly, I found her on MySpace a few years ago and she's still kind of a mess. She gave her own kid up for adoption and quickly got pregnant again. I think in a situation like that, nobody gets to be the good guy. When I was a little kid, I went to daycare with my siblings to a woman's house whose neighbors had adopted. The neighbors really wanted this one little girl, but had to take her older sister and younger brother as a group in order to get the child, which is messed up already that they wanted to break the children apart. Well, they neglected the two they didn't want a whole bunch. They only brought the one girl a bike, and when somebody gave the other two free bikes, they threw them out. My babysitter would let the two come over when the parents were taking their favorite one out. I shared my candy with them. I stopped going to that woman for babysitting, and I never found out what happened to them. While it wasn't adoption, a year ago I took in a 17-year-old high school senior who really didn't have any other options. After the first month, things had finally settled down and I was starting to feel like he was turning some things in his life around. At this point, Mum re-enters the picture, but he really didn't want anything to do with her anymore. I found out later she won him over by promising not to make him follow any rules when he was at her house. I was naive enough to think him spending time with his mum was going to be a good thing, and since he was 18 by this point and I'd never actually adopted him, I really didn't have too much of an option. He started staying at his mum's again one night a week. She'd buy him beer and turn a blind eye towards his use of pain meds, and she got to feel like a good mother again because she was seeing her son again. His grades started to slip, he started disrespecting his teachers and me, money started disappearing from my wallet, but he refused to acknowledge that anything was going on. It was around this time that I learned he was not only using, but also selling anything he could get his hands on. We're talking green herb, pain meds, Adderall, spice, and I finally issued an ultimatum. I told him I was willing to be patient and help him work through everything else, but if he wanted to continue to live in my house, he needed to stop dealing. He packed his stuff that night and left. I continued to meet with him and tutor him and thought all things considered, we still had a pretty good relationship despite me having to ask him to leave. I later learned he didn't feel the same way. He started targeting other students I was working with, and soon several of them were using substances provided by him. It was brilliant on his part. He really knew how to hurt me. I've spent the last year trying to pick up broken pieces he's left behind and feeling responsible for some other students that have been or currently are struggling with a variety of things because of him. I was adopted at 2 months of age, and they never hid it from me, so there was no family insertion drama. I'm now a 53-year-old man. When I was a child, remember, adopted, my parents would threaten to take me back to where they got me whenever I brought home a B on my report card or didn't pack up my room or didn't work hard enough helping in the yard. No other mistreatment and no slave driving, but damn, I'm still kind of messed up from those threats. Seriously, this isn't a joke. I'm sitting here sweating just reading these comments. My ex-wife used to say, "It's a wonder you're as close to normal as you are," after visits with my parents, and she wasn't completely joking. What's a quote from a fictional character that changed your life? We accept the love we think we deserve. I think that if I ever have kids and they're upset, I won't tell them that there are people starving in China or anything like that, because it wouldn't change the fact that they were upset. And even if somebody else has it much worse, that doesn't really change the fact that you have what you have. That's from The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I don't know if I'm being cliché. Nothing worth having is easy to come by. Dr. Robert Kelso. A boy who idealizes war is perplexed why a war hero wants to retire to become a farmer. He asks the wise warrior why he seems to despise war, and this is the warrior's response. There is more honor in a field well plowed than one steeped in blood. Many of the truths we cling to depend largely on your point of view. Ben Kenobi. I survived because the fire inside burned brighter than the fire around me. Joshua Graham in Fallout New Vegas. I think one that resonates with me is when Captain Vimes says about his alcoholism, "One's too many, two's not enough." And that's when I knew that cutting down wouldn't work. I'd have to completely stop. I've been sober nearly 5 years now. It's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That's not weakness, that's life. Jean-Luc Picard. Tomorrow's the day you'll pay the bills. Tomorrow's the day you'll grow up and start acting responsible. But tomorrow never comes for you because it's always so conveniently a day away. I think this came from Susie in Hey Arnold. I had to copy-paste because I forgot the original quote verbatim, but the "tomorrow never comes" part will always stick with me despite me being a massive procrastinator. You can't keep blaming yourself. Just blame yourself once and move on. Homer Simpson, one of the wisest pieces of advice I've ever heard. Homer really does have his moments of brilliance in the show, and you have to look at the fact that despite his sheer idiocy, he's managed to strike up a work-life balance that has largely made him happy. He has just enough to provide for himself and his family, and has his main priority, making sure his loved ones come before him. I of course am referring to the good Simpsons seasons, not the later ones where he turns into a selfish moron 24/7. "I'd trade it all for a little more," C. Montgomery Burns. I saw some of my friends become big, and they don't even answer calls and don't have an honest reply for a question. I remember this quote, and it's incredible. "Friends, family, religion. These are the 3 demons you must slay if you wish to succeed in business." Mr. Burns may well just be a caricature of certain rich people, but at least he wears it on his sleeve and doesn't hide behind false virtue. The hero decides to give their life to save the day, and because of their sacrifice, the good guys win. The survivors all cheer, and everybody lives happily ever after. But the hero never gets to see that ending. They'll never know if their sacrifice actually made a difference. They'll never know if the day was really saved. In the end, they just have to have faith. Ain't that a witch? Epsilon from Red vs. Blue. "How lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard." Winnie the Pooh. I'm a grown man, and reading the end of The House of Pooh Corner left me feeling a kind of way I can't even describe. You know, it's at times like this, when I'm trapped in an airlock with a man from Beetlejuice and about to die of asphyxiation in deep space, that I really wish I'd listened to what my mother told me when I was young. Why? What did she tell you? Oh, I don't know. I didn't listen. Said by Arthur Dent. I think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has so many gems. I can't recall the exact words, but I think the definition of flight is the best quote of anything I've read. In order to accomplish flight, simply throw yourself at the ground and miss. I'm a quitter. I come from a long line of quitters. It's amazing I'm here at all. Bernard Black from Black Books. Some people will always need help, but that doesn't mean they're not worth helping. Mira Reed from Game of Thrones. There are no choices. Nothing but a straight line. The illusion comes afterwards when you ask, why me, and what if? When you look back and see the branches, like a pruned bonsai tree, or forked lightning. If you'd done something differently, it wouldn't be you. It would be someone else looking back, asking a different set of questions. Max Payne, in Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. Personal isn't the same as important. This is said by both Captain Carrot and Granny Weatherwax in the Discworld books by Terry Pratchett. Sir Terry Pratchett's books have too many of these to count, so here's a few of the best. There is no justice. There's just us. There's no greys, only white that's got grubby. I'm surprised you don't know that. And sin, young man, is when you treat people as things, including yourself. That's what sin is. It's a lot more complicated than that. No, it ain't. When people say things is a lot more complicated than that, they means they're getting worried that they won't like the truth. People as things. That's where it starts. Patronizing is a big word. Zoology is really quite short. Are you listening? Good. Now, if you trust in yourself and believe in your dreams and follow your star, you'll still be beaten by people who spent their time working hard and learning things and weren't so lazy. Goodbye. Them as can do has to do for them as can't, and someone has to speak up for them as has no voices. And of course, the reason that the rich were so rich, Vimes reasoned, was because they managed to spend less money. Take Boots, for example. He earned $38 a month plus allowances. A really good pair of leather boots cost $50. But an affordable pair of boots, which was sort of okay for a season or two and then leaked like hell when the cardboard gave out, they cost about $10. Those were the kind of boots that Vimes always bought, and wore until the soles were so thin that he could tell where he was in the city on foggy nights by the feel of the cobbles. But the thing was that good boots lasted for years and years. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that would still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time. While the poor man who could only afford cheap boots would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. This was the Captain Samuel Vimes' boots theory of socio-economic unfairness. The best part about that being that he eventually gets a really good pair of leather boots, but hates them because the soles are so good that he can't feel where he is in the city with them. We live with dignity, we can't die with it. Dr. Gregory House. Time is an illusion, doubly so. It's real life, and in real life, you can't always win, said Gerald in Hey Arnold. This reminds me of a great and very real quote about parenting from the excellent show Ted Lasso. His mother reminds him when he's having a tough time knowing if he's raising his son right that sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but most of the time you just tie. You just keep playing. In other news, when the narrator was 6 years old and dumb, he really didn't like Hey Arnold. I feel like I would have appreciated it a lot more if I were a couple of years older when it was airing. And someday, you're going to look around and realize that everybody loves you, but nobody likes you. And that's the loneliest feeling in the world. BoJack Horseman. I don't know how many years I got left on this earth, so I'm going to get real weird with it. Everybody's favorite degenerate on Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Get busy living or get busy dying. Andy Dufresne, The Shawshank Redemption. I expect nothing and I'm still let down. Dewey, Malcolm in the Middle. It's like those lights in the sky. They all look the same from here, but that doesn't make them less pretty. River Wiles.
This is my family. I found it all on my own. It's a little broken, but still good. Yeah, still good.
Stitch. Although that would compete in that film with
Ohana means family. A family means no one gets left behind or forgotten.
A person's smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. Agent K, Men in Black. Be loyal to what matters. Arthur Morgan. I remember thinking before the game was launched, this guy seems like a total jerk. There's no way Rockstar can make him a more likable character than Marston. Now that I've had a few months to stew on it, I honestly think he might be my favorite video game character of all time. Probably top 5 protagonists in all fiction. The BoJack Horseman quote that I always remember was the jogging baboon. It gets easier. Every day it gets a little easier. But you've got to do it every day. That's the hard part. But it does get easier. The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. Everyone always has a story they tell themselves to justify bad decisions. It never matters. You're always alone in your actions. Hawk from Dragon Age Inquisition. A wise man can learn more from his enemies than a fool from his friends. Rush. People like to invent monsters and monstrosities, then they seem less monstrous themselves. When they get blind drunk, cheat, steal, beat their wives, starve an old woman, when they kill a trapped fox with an axe or riddle the last existing unicorn with arrows, they like to think that the Bane entering cottages at daybreak is more monstrous than they are. They feel better then. They find it easier to live. Geralt of Rivia, The Last Wish. Not everything's a lesson. Sometimes you just fail. Dwight K. Schrute. The K does not stand for fart, by the way. Sucking at something is the first step to being sorta good at something. Jake the Dog. You can handle anything for 10 seconds. Kimmy Schmidt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Losing people is a part of life, but that doesn't mean you stop letting them in. Lego Batman. That movie came out shortly after I lost my grandpa. He was one of 2 people I was closest with. When he died, I went through a really rough phase. Ever since I heard that phrase, it stuck with me. Today me will live in the moment, unless it's unpleasant, in which case me will eat a cookie. Cookie Monster. I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. Andrew Bernard, aka the Nod Dog. This quote actually made my friends start saying, "This is the good old days, guys," whenever it's just a really nice moment and there's a lull. I love it so much. Better to serve a good man than to rule with an evil one. Merlin. That quote has stuck with me for so long and I have thought about it many times. Well, this is probably a more healthy take than the saying, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, which, if you put aside the religious aspect, does imply that power is preferable to being good to each other? And screw that. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment. Gandalf, Lord of the Rings. When you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. God on Futurama. Life is pain, Highness. Anyone who says differently is selling something. Wesley and the Princess Bride. Never half-ass 2 things. Whole-ass 1 thing. Confidence. It's the food of the wise man, but the liquor of the fool. Vikram in The Office. Pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame. Uncle Iroh in Avatar: The Last Airbender. What's the most important step a man can take? Always the next step. Dalinar Colin. There's no geographical solution to a spiritual problem. Tony Soprano replying to someone who wanted to get away from it all. If you want to know what a man's like, judge him on the way he treats his inferiors, not his equals, said Sirius Black. It always really stuck with me because I think that's really solid advice. Oh, the past can hurt, but the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. Rafiki in The Lion King. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it'll beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Rocky Balboa. An old friend once told me something that gave me great comfort. Something he'd read. He said that Mozart, Beethoven, and Chopin never died. They simply became music. Dr. Robert Ford in Westworld. It's important to draw wisdom from different places. If you take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Uncle Iroh, once again. Never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you. Tyrion Lannister. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you! Samwise Gamgee is the friend we all need. And although it's less inspiring in the moment, this other one is, if anything, more profound. By all rights, we shouldn't even be here, but we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had a lot of chances of turning back, only they didn't, because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. That thing gets me every time. The problem's not the problem. The problem is your attitude about the problem. Jack Sparrow. The best answer is usually the easiest one, and I'll be honest, killing you is hard. GLaDOS. Taking your own life? Interesting expression. Taking it from who? Once it's over, it's not you who'll miss it. Your own death is something that happens to everyone else. Your life is not your own. Keep your hands off it. Sherlock in the BBC. That quote was like a punch to the gut. Thor's mum, Frigga, in Endgame, when she says, everyone fails at who they're supposed to be. The measure of a person, a hero, is how they succeed at being who they are. One is never alone with a rubber duck. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I take this one to heart and have a rubber duck with me almost anywhere I go. I see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It's what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. Mewtwo, Pokemon, the first movie. Oh boy, I didn't think that the bloody Pokemon movie would have any sort of resonance to anyone 30 years later, but there you go, a genetically cloned psychic cat spitting truths. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I'll face my fear. I'll permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it has gone past me, I'll turn to see fear's path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Maud Deeb. You can't give that to her, she screamed. It's not safe. It's a sword, said the Hogfather. They're not meant to be safe. She's a child, shouted Crumley. It's educational. What if she cuts herself? That will be an important lesson. The Hogfather by Terry Pratchett, in which death takes on the role of a Santa Claus-like figure in that universe for one night. Anyone can wear the mask. You could wear the mask. If you didn't know that before, I hope you do now. Miles Morales. Had to be me. Someone else might have gotten it wrong. Said by Mordin Solus in Mass Effect 3. The Mass Effect trilogy is my favorite series in gaming. I still remember my first playthrough, keeping Rex alive, sacrificing Kaiden, trying to negotiate with the Council, planting the memorial on the crashed Normandy site, keeping everyone alive during the impossible mission, finally resolving the Geth-Quarian conflict, seeing Jack look after her own crew, but nothing made me stop, pause the game, and put the controller down like this moment with Mordin Solus. While not my favorite of the crew, that goes to my boy Legion. You do have a soul, my Geth friend. He, like myself, like Legion, was willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good of the galaxy and correct the mistakes of the past. You're right, Morden. It had to be you. Someone else might have gotten it wrong. Thank you. Dark and difficult times lie ahead. Soon we must all face the choice of what is right and what is easy. Albus Dumbledore, Harry Potter. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Ferris Bueller. How much can a crown be worth when a crow can dine upon a king? Jaime Lannister. What is better, to be born good or to overcome your evil nature through great effort? Parthenax. It's funny, when you look at somebody through rose-colored glasses, all of the red flags just look like flags. Wanda from BoJack Horseman. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and been widely regarded as a bad move. Douglas Adams in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy. Yondu Udonta, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. We accept the love we think we deserve, said by Charlie's teacher in The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Death is lighter than a feather, duty heavier than a mountain. Alan Mandragoran. And remember, bad times are just times that are bad. Katrina from Animal Crossing. Knowledge, like air, is vital to life. No one should be denied it. V for Vendetta. Always try to be nice and never fail to be kind. The Doctor. Capaldi killed it with the delivery of so many lines. I don't know if it's just the words or how he said it, but I've kept it as something I try to do in life. Also, the line where he's trying to talk down a war on Earth. Something along the lines of, "And what do you do with that pain? You hold it tight until it burns, and you vow that no one should ever feel this way." Everyone I've cared for has either died or left me. Everyone, freaking except for you. So don't tell me I'd be safer with somebody else, because the truth is, I'd just be more scared. Ellie in The Last of Us. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Malcolm Merlin. In The Last Jedi, Yoda said, "The greatest teacher failure is." He always has the best lines. I was so scared of becoming my father, mostly because I never thought I could. I mean, how can you become someone so great, so selfless? I guess you can only try. I spent so long fighting for a world I wanted, didn't realize what you needed. Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III. Every man dies, but not every man really lives. William Wallace. Not to be confused with Wallace and Gromit. By experiencing both victory and defeat, running away and shedding tears, a man will become a man. It's okay to cry, but you have to move on. Shanks in One Piece. What made somebody automatically qualify for world's biggest D-bag? I was at an Apple service provider waiting for an iPod Nano replacement when this guy, who was talking to another Apple employee, started threatening her. He was furious because she wouldn't replace his iPad. She was extremely and unbelievably patient and repeatedly tried to explain to him that the store was just an authorized service provider and not an Apple store, and that they'd need approval from Apple's regional office to replace his iPad. He asked for a piece of paper, scrawled his Twitter handle on it, and repeatedly told the girl to check it to see how many followers he had. "You'll be surprised," he said, "and I'll be tweeting about this. Show your manager and maybe they'll change their mind." He also said his number of followers will put a dent on Apple and that he'll never buy an Apple product again. He also repeatedly threw his iPhone down onto the counter to demonstrate that he couldn't break it. He was still at it when I left. Nuts. And the kicker? I jotted down the Twitter handle that he gave the girl and looked at it when I got home. It was owned by some Canadian hockey player with like 200,000 plus followers who was in another part of the world and who looked nothing like the guy at the store. I mean, at least he didn't say, "I'm a big deal on this website called Reddit." I worked at a local Cold Stone when I was a kid. This shop was owned by a family who had kids in my high school, so I was pretty close with the owners. On a particularly busy afternoon, I was whipping up someone's ice cream when I overhear things getting heated at the cash register. One of our owners, Lynn, was working there, and an upset woman was complaining about the price of her order. Lynn broke down each item and how much tax was, to which the customer responded that she deserved a discount, and if she didn't get one that she'd be calling her good friends who owned the establishment. Lynn calmly said, "I'm Lynn, and I own this establishment. Please leave." I've never seen someone turn red so fast. Bartending once, I picked up a table so that a server could go home early, and the guests at the table were really rude to me. They wouldn't call me by my name, they just kept calling me different racial slurs against white people, even though I'm Mexican. I smiled and gave them great service, but it was clear they were trying to get something for free. When they asked for my manager, I couldn't hear what they were telling him, but the people seated at the end of the bar near their table spoke up and told my manager they were lying. We ended up calling the police when they refused to pay their tab, which was over $100. They ended up paying it, and then my manager comped $10 off so that I could get a tip. I tried to buy the nice couple at the bar around, and my manager comped that too. This makes me think that stores should hire people to stand around in plain clothes and berate D-bags when the opportunity shows itself. Although this does seem like it would be both peak entertainment and contribute to a massive rise in staff morale, I don't see many retailers going for it, both based on the expense and the fact that most of them bend over backwards to accommodate even the worst possible customers. I used to work at the local grocery store during high school as a bagger and cashier. One day, a man walked in with a coupon for $2 off a $6 chicken. After explaining to him that the coupon was expired and that I couldn't accept it, he calmly says, "Oh really? Well, I'll get it anyway." A couple of hours later, one of my coworkers came running in yelling that everyone's tires were flat. We reviewed the surveillance footage, which showed him walk outside, throw the chicken into the air, and freak the frick out and start slashing everyone's tires. He ended up having to pay for all the damages and was no longer allowed near any of the employees. Are you serious? For $2? What the frick is wrong with people? I know the owner, and I will get you fired. My dad's the owner, and he warned me you're a butthole. Now go away. Huh, I had a similar one only last weekend. I was just about to start work at a nightclub, so it must have been getting on for midnight. I'm stood at the side of the bar talking things over with a girl called Becca, who's out of sight in the office. Becca was about to open the upstairs bar for me when this drunken girl shoves her way up to me and exclaims, "Get the manager for me now." I took a second to assess the situation because this girl looks a little out of place in the club. She's clearly been drinking heavily and could be in some sort of trouble. I place my water on the bar, and I start to ask her if something has happened when she butts in with, "It's 12 o'clock and you haven't opened upstairs yet. You're stood here chatting up barmaids and you're ruining my night." Okay, I think to myself out loud. By my watch, it's 11:55 and I'm heading upstairs now, so if you can bear with me for… And I'm cut off again. "Don't you know who I am? My uncle is the owner and you are out of a fricking job." I couldn't help but grin at this last statement. "See her?" I say to the drunk girl as Becca emerges from the office. "Her father owns the place. And you two don't look very related now, do you?" This drunk girl, clearly outraged by this point, decides to just take a swing at me. Like, what? Becca responds by wrenching the girl's arm behind her back, jabbing her keys into the girl's side, and running the now squealing drunk girl out the front door and onto the cold, wet pavement. Turns out the drunk girl was one of Becca's little sister's friends who was out celebrating her 18th birthday and thought she could get special treatment if she dropped the owner's name every 5 minutes. They'd already let her in the club for free, you see. This morning I found out she ended up getting banned from half the clubs in the city centre for 4 weeks. Instant karma. I used to work in retail a few years back. Had some guy come in that tried to return everything that was far outside the return policy, over a year. And he was outraged when he was informed we couldn't return it for him. He started off slowly, saying what an outrage it was. Then he continued saying how everyone he was dealing with was incompetent. He eventually got so upset that his antics weren't working that he said he was going to bring a few of his weapons in and pointed at people saying, "I'm gonna shoot you, and you, and you." Needless to say, the police were called. 6 cop cars were waiting for him outside when his rant was finally over. When I was 18, I worked at Toys R Us, and a lot of people thought that it was a fun job because we're surrounded by toys. People get crazy about their fricking toys and games for their brat kids, but one kid always stands out. I was working the customer service desk, which entailed returns, checkouts, and answering phones. One day I was working the desk and there was a long line of people. Everyone was being very patient with me answering phones and helping everyone check out, but this one guy had an attitude right away. He kept mumbling about how horribly rude I was and that I wasn't working fast enough. He bought his crap and walked away. I thought that was over, but he quickly came back into the store and cut the line. He started telling me to find him a pair of scissors so he could open his purchase. I calmly explained that I didn't have a pair of scissors, and I really didn't, by the way. He then proceeded to come around the desk, physically push me out of the way and started opening all of the drawers. My manager witnessed the whole thing and came over and told him to get out of the frickin' store. The guy then screamed at my manager to call the police and see if he cared. We didn't have to call the police because there was an off-duty one in line, and he quickly explained to the man that he was being detained until the police arrived. That quickly shut the guy the F up, and he was subsequently arrested for disorderly conduct and harassment. Enjoy your frickin' toys, you butthole. I am a retail monger, which the narrator is assuming is a misspelling of manager. My store has a really crappy price match policy. There's a few things we won't match. One of these is that you need to use a loyalty card to get the deal. I had an older gentleman come in to price match 5 bottles of Pepsi. We sold them for $1.50 and a competitor sold them for $1. We couldn't price match because the competitor deal needed their loyalty card. And this is where it went from 0 to crazy in 3 seconds. The guy grabbed one of the bottles, starts to open it and says, "Well, if you won't match it, I guess I have to pour this pop over your register. What are you going to do then?" Followed with a smirk. I kept my cool, didn't miss a beat, and stated, "Okay, I'm going to have to call the cops then." He got super upset and couldn't understand why I'd call the cops for him, and I tried to explain that he just threatened to vandalize the store's property. After he understood, he walked out. All over $2.50. Anytime anyone says, "Don't you know who I am?" Ugh. Ah yes, the statement that guarantees the utterer a place in hell. It's been a while since I've seen that one, honestly. Annoying to know that there are a few people still out of touch enough to realize that it's more effective than a badge saying D-bag in signifying the amount of respect they should pay you. I didn't do anything about it, but this was my favorite. I have small accessories that I sell for one of our product lines. One of them costs $20, and shipping and handling via the mail was $4. Perfectly reasonable. Then this guy went off the rails because I wouldn't give him any deal. We have no margins on that kind of stuff, so I'm most certainly not going to cut any big deals. He threatened he'd post his sordid tale on all of the popular forums that pertained to the industry. I pretty much told him to go ahead, and I didn't think much about it. I came back in after the weekend, the guy went ahead and posted a bunch of new threads on all of the major forums and emailed me all of the links. I checked them all, and the forum community members pretty much all told him to stop being such a moron. I felt pretty smug about that. I once worked at a little gaming store next to a big retailer. I don't get any commission or anything, just helped kids pick out games or whatever. I sold the odd Xbox here or there. So some guy comes in asking me to match a retailer's deal on a Nintendo DS. For whatever management reason, I couldn't do it. He starts to get ticked off and there's nothing I can do. My hands are tied. So he leaves. I think nothing of it, and then he walks past about 15 minutes later and screams from the door, "I got it from this big retail store for whatever price. And I'm never coming back, you C-word." I was a 15-year-old girl. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work in parking garages, so I see all kinds of overreactions. I had an elderly woman once refuse to pay the $39 for parking. I don't set the prices, shoot someone else. I went down willing to cut her some slack and charge her the validated rate at $20 if she'd let me keep a copy of her receipt. I no sooner rounded the corner than the old lady rushed over to me screaming with a terrified child next to her, ranting about how, "My father fought in the war and what you're doing to me isn't right." She went on to compare what I was doing to what the Germans did in World War II, and that if she wasn't allowed to leave the garage for free, that she'd stay in the garage and starve herself. I, of course, did what any young and aspiring manager would do, and I laughed at her. And then she spit on me. I also once had a guy who claimed to be an FBI agent threaten to have me deported while I was speaking to him over the intercom. I went down to speak to him in person, and being that I'm not from another country, his deportation threat had been taken away. The guy went on an absolutely bat-crap crazy rant about how foreigners were taking over the country and how the fat cat corporations were making all of the money while normal men lost their jobs. I asked him to see his badge, to which he gave me all kinds of bullcrap about not carrying when he's out of state. He then got out of the car and called the local police department, who came down, to which he made no mention of being an FBI agent. The cops informed him that he would indeed need to pay his bill before exiting, and that he was on the hook for the $39. In all cases, I go into these situations looking to give someone a break. I understand that after a day in the mall with your family, you sometimes forget to get your ticket validated. Most garage managers have the ability to overwrite the fee on your ticket, and if they say they aren't, they're lying to you. If you're nice to us, more often than not, we'll cut you a break. Giving us food also helps. In 2012, I told a client that he really needed to update his copies of Office 97 to the current version, if you can even call that an upgrade. I gave him a whole list of reasons why, including that Microsoft stopped releasing security updates for that version quite a while back. He flipped out and demanded that I call Microsoft and tell them that they needed to keep releasing security updates for Office 97. When I told him it didn't exactly work that way, he said, "Well, you just tell them who I am and make sure that they know that if they don't fix this, I'll never buy another version of Office again." Just wow. I used to work at a sandwich shop, and my old boss was notoriously aggressive. To customers. He'd fight for his employees tooth and nail. One time, some irate idiot had something he wanted to discuss with my boss, and being in a rare accommodating mood, my boss said, "Just give me a moment to help this line of customers, and then you'll have my complete attention." This guy, not knowing how lucky he was, pressed his luck. After enduring another onslaught of verbal attacks, my boss handed the guy his card and said to call him later. On the back of the card, he had written, "Below me." I worked at a cafe about 2 years ago. We had an espresso ready to go, but no one knew who it belonged to. I decided to roam around the cafe with said espresso and asked any waiting customers if they'd ordered this coffee. So, after a few polite replies of, "Oh, no, sorry," I get to one business-looking man sitting with the owner of the fruit shop across the way. The owner had a bad reputation at my cafe as being a sleazebag, according to the girls. So I asked the businessman, "Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, mate, but did you order an espresso?" The businessman looked at me and said, "No." So I began to walk away, and as I did, he says, "Oi, it's pronounced sir." I turned around and said, "Pardon me?" not understanding what the heck he was on about. He then stares at me with unblinking eyes and says, "When you," points finger, "talk to me, you call me sir. Got it?" After a few seconds of bewilderment on my part, I utter, "Okay then," and proceed to continue finding the espresso's owner. It was incredibly embarrassing. Called out in a busy cafe when trying to do my job, it made me feel 2 feet tall. Joke's on him as I made sure his coffee was bitter, just like his heart. As someone who was a waitress for a very long time and also worked in retail, I can't beg people enough to say something when you see a customer acting like a total D-bag to an employee. The employee can't do anything without risking his or her job, but you have the power to put jerks like this in their place, and the employee will most likely be forever grateful. Also, real-life karma. While I agree that it's probably the right thing to do, I'd say that it's one heck of a gamble for the person doing it. Either you're correct and it really is just some coward who gets a kick out of screaming at teens and service people and who backs down immediately, or you get one of the genuine tire-slashing psychopaths mentioned here already, and you're immediately in over your head. That said, you have my admiration if you do stand up to these jerks. While working as a manager at a movie theater, I had someone call in because our online ticketing system was broken. We were just a little independent, so the large fees from sites like Fandango didn't work for us, and we had our own that worked okay. As stated, it was down and I was in the process of fixing it, but it would take some time. I tell the gentleman that he can always come into the box office and buy the tickets and save himself $1 doing so. This, of course, is incredibly insulting somehow. He lives 30 minutes away and he's worth $200 an hour, and he wants us to fix the site now. It continues for some time, but the third time he decided to mention his salary, I elected to have the call drop and the phone lines go down for a little while. I have 2 stories. First, one was just about a perfectly healthy 65-year-old who decided to deprive a mother and her severely mentally handicapped child from parking in a handicap space. He went on to just scoff and walk away when she called him out on it. No justice was done, sadly. But I used to have this other woman come into my work all the time who was just some withered-up old trophy wife with a superiority complex and a Mercedes. We have a curbside service for takeout at my job, and every frickin' Friday night, the absolute busiest day of the week at any restaurant, especially at mine where takeout usually does something close to $2 to $3 grand on busy nights, she used to park in the dedicated curbside spots and dine in for nearly 2 hours. Needless to say, I've had numerous complaints from people who mean to use that spot appropriately, but we can't do anything because anytime a manager politely reminds her to stop parking there, she goes on about being a paying customer who has the right to park wherever she wants. Blah, blah, blah. Management at my work will avoid confrontation with guests whenever possible. Even I'd run into her several times and reminded her myself, but one night she parks halfway in a handicap space and screams at me to mind your own fricking business, kid. So yeah, I called security. Enjoy your $400 ticket, C-word. Nearly got a chub watching her turn over that little envelope. She doesn't come to my work anymore, and everything seems a little brighter because of it. I worked at DirecTV in the cancellations department, a grocery store for nearly 6 years, and I'm currently front desk monkey at a hospital. I've nearly mastered that awful specimen known as the irate customer. In large crowds, I find it important to set up and get right in the problem if they're picking on a quieter employee who won't defend themselves. DirecTV taught me to let them vent and let it all out, and the grocery store taught me my judging eyes. Eyes that seem to say, you just yelled at a 19-year-old because everyone bought the hot dogs you wanted before the 4th of July instead of the hour before the party like you did. You just stare at them, let them fester in their awkward silence, because what are you supposed to do? Call Nathan's Hot Dogs and order a special air flight package? At the grocery store, I had a lady screaming about how long the line was, and so as she waited for me to do something, at the top of my lungs I asked, would anyone like to satisfy this woman by letting her get in front of them? It was an honest question, albeit phrased awkwardly. But no one piped up, and there she was. I asked everyone in line if they'd lend their generosity, and not one voice chimed in. I could write a book on the crap I've dealt with in my tender young job history. I used to be a manager at a pizza shop, and we had a customer that would order the same pizza the same way 3 times a week, and always call back to complain about it. He'd always complain about the crust being too thick, but he didn't like the thin crust, and nothing we ever tried was good enough for him. We had given him a bunch of free pizzas and discounts and whatnot up to this point, trying to retain him as a customer, but he called back in a rage one night when I was the only manager there. It went a little something like this. I need to speak to a manager. I am a manager, sir. What can I do for you tonight? You're a manager? Yes, sir. No fricking wonder. I order pizza from this overpriced crap hole multiple times a week, and you always screw it up. The crust is always too thick, and you just aren't smart enough to figure out how to fix it. Yeah, sir, I'm aware of the situation. If our pizza really isn't to your liking, maybe you should consider trying something else. Or maybe you should be fired because you're absolutely freaking terrible at your job. I don't even know why they let women out of the house, and you're allowed to be a goddamn manager? You're a worthless B-word, and you can't even make a pizza right. Maybe you should go home and let men do the work. You'd probably make a better working girl than anything else. I then proceeded to very calmly tell him we'd no longer be accepting his business, and literally told him to F off. I called my general manager to let him know. They congratulated me for it, and told me he wished he could have done it himself. In short, an angry customer told me he thought I'd make a better brothel employee than a pizza shop manager. I told him to screw himself, and I was praised by my manager for it. I spent the past couple of days on a Greyhound that was going across the country, Canada, and we pulled into Quebec. The security guard spoke fluent English. I overheard a cell phone conversation, but he seemed to be a massive D-bag. People who asked him if he spoke English usually did so in French, and he responded with yes and helped them out. Then a little Asian girl who couldn't have been more than 15 came up and asked him if he spoke English. When I chatted with her later, I found out her English was pretty raw and she moved to Canada from Taiwan about 3 years ago. The security guard said no English repeatedly, and she looked distressed. She'd asked a few others, but no one had really responded, and he looked like the only person working at the terminal at that moment. The ticket counters were closed and no janitors or anything like that were around. She went around asking others, but the people who responded didn't know the answers she was looking for. She promptly started crying. I went over and helped her as best I could. When the security guy walked past, he simply laughed at her and called a friend on his phone where he spoke nothing but flawless English. What crazy stunt did you see at a sporting event that never made it to air? Watching a third-round FA Cup game midweek in the pouring rain. Boring as heck. I heard a bloody hell. I turned around to find the cameraman quickly refocusing on a large fat man wearing nothing but a large baby nappy and performing a 30-foot knee slide in the mud in front of the fans. Camera guy was laughing his head off. He turned to me and said, "Shame it won't make the highlights." I was shooting a Big Ten football game in 2011, and I saw a gentleman in the stands who appeared to be drunk. He was standing up at his seat, waving back and forth and kind of stumbling. I turned the camera onto him because I thought it was kind of funny. Then all of a sudden he just fell over. The people next to him jumped on him and started doing CPR. I stopped rolling immediately because it was pretty clear this guy had had a massive heart attack. The EMTs came and carried him out on a stretcher and put him on an ambulance. The worst feeling in the world was watching the ambulance just sit in the tunnel for a long time and not turning its lights on. That guy was already gone. It was freaking horrible, and I felt like a huge butthole for not realizing what was going on. It still really bothers me. I'm certified in CPR now, in part because of that experience. I'm 90% certain we caught a cheating couple at the US Open this year. They got caught off guard on camera, winning a giveaway, and they did not look happy about it, and both got real suspicious-like. Okay, so I've never done sports, but I work in corporate AV. I've seen corporate Christmas parties get completely out of hand, like women's chest on camera, fights, people doing the deed on the dance floor, and general shenanigans. I've heard mics left open while people were unaware and going to the washroom or making petty or rude remarks, but the winner was one of the first huge events my former employer did in 2002. First anniversary party celebrating the merger of two energy companies into one mega company. More than 2,500 people, 6 15 by 20-foot screens, 2,000 feet of P&D, 6 cameras, bands, acrobats, F&B, the works. Months of planning, a week of setup, and 3 days of teardown for one 5-hour gig. They hired acrobats from Cirque du Soleil to perform throughout the party. One of them we shall call Balloon Dancer. Balloon Dancer did a routine where she did acrobatics on a pair of ribbons suspended from a giant helium balloon 40 or so feet in the air. Balloon Dancer wore a sheer red bodysuit over a pair of shorts and a bandeau top. During her routine, the bandeau top rolled down, exposing her own impressive balloons to the crowd on 6 15 by 20-foot screens. The switcher op only noticed after about 20 seconds that she was upside down and undressed from the waist up and started calling for different camera shots, but all of the cameras were focused on the action. I got melons on 1. Camera 2, you're live. Nope, I've got maracas on 2. Yeah, I've got balloons on 3. Camera 4, go wide. You're live. Well, that's a pretty great story, so we'll accept you going totally away from the subject of sporting events. And as you say, complete debauchery isn't unusual at corporate events. Actually, now I've realized you broke the rules in 2 ways, because this totally made it to air. So, American women's soccer player Mia Hamm was attending the Cincinnati Reds game. The camera zooms in on her, and she takes a huge, and I mean huge, chug of her beer. The announcer says, "Mia Hamm is in the stands tonight, reminding everyone the importance of keeping hydrated." Back in the 1990s, before they blew up the Kingdome, there was a file of compiled footage of all the people sneaking up the 300-level nosebleeds and screwing, but it was all sped up to ×3 speed. I think it made it in circles around the UW Tech undergrad community for years. The Kingdome 300 level was pretty legendary. Unless the Yankees or some other big name was in town, it was completely deserted. People got arrested for getting undressed in the restrooms and just, hanging out. When I was a kid, my dad was a camera operator for the local public access channel and would volunteer to record the Sunday sermons at our church. I often got to sit with him in the camera room and mostly watch, but sometimes help. Occasionally, he'd let me operate one of the boards to record the children's sermon, where all of the kids in the congregation would go to the front and sit on the dais, and the minister would tell them a story before they went to Sunday school. My job was to pan through the groups of kids and find the ones that were goofing off and cut to them for a couple of seconds, then back to the group shot. The funniest one was when we caught a kid who was standing, bent over, just waving his butt in the air. Waving it at the other kids, waving it at the congregation, a few other things. It was hilarious. We figured it would be inappropriate to include that in the taping, so we didn't use it. Not on the camera, but was part of the crew. The cheerleaders formed a tunnel for the players to run through. Handheld camera was right behind one of the cheerleaders, waiting for the team. Watching it later, you could see that she was getting a little flustered because she knew the camera was there and what was coming up. Right before the players came out, all of the cheerleaders bent over as part of the routine, and the camera gets a perfect view that would make a gynecologist blush. The producer yells, "Oh frick, pull out, pull out!" and then realizes what he said and the whole truck loses it. I've been working with the same crew for a long time, and we practically chat through our headsets during the entire game. There have been many laugh-out-loud moments, and my director would purposely take my camera when I'd be laughing from a funny comment someone made in the headset. I'd try so hard to hold the camera still and be focused, but all you'd see is the camera shaking from hearty laughter on my part. Even the cameras that aren't on your shoulders, it's super easy to shake it when you're laughing and zoomed in on a player. Best times. I've only done a couple, and the director mostly wants all the cameras on the action on the field. However, when alcohol is involved, we see a lot of stuff happening, and directors frequently chuckle but then tell us to pan away. I'm glad you caught that, but we can't show it. Today I learned directors are the fun police. I mean, they're usually laughing, and we hold the shot long enough for other cameras to switch to the quad split or multi-view so they can see what we see before the director asks us to pan away, in case a TD accidentally slips and cuts to us live on some couple dry humping in their seats. Most sporting events have so many cameras on the field, and no quad split anyway, so it's a good chuckle between the cameraman and the control booth. Live TV directors are ultimately responsible for everything going on, including what goes to air, and they're not the same level as film and TV directors, so one or two mistakes and they just get fired. Broadcasting networks have their standards and practices as well, so they can't be too loose. Most of them are fun, but they can't be too much fun. I remember visiting a rural family that had a satellite dish when those things were rare. They got network feeds, so no commercial breaks. One of their favorite pastimes was ABC News on the weekends. Max Robinson, rest in peace, was a different man when the red light was off. During the breaks and before the show started, he'd be smoking cigarettes, yelling and swearing at the staff and scowling. Then the director would start the countdown and he'd put the ashtray away and transform into straight newsman. Unintentionally hilarious. I was a crew at the sporting event in question. I was doing the tech rehearsal for a major sport team starting in my season. We'd gone through most of the show, the flags came out, my crew dropped our staging. We all wanted to leave, I had a date to run off to. They ran all of the graphics by the Jumbotron, and we're about to strike everything, and over the radio comes, "Okay, we're going to test the doves." Everyone looks around, and out of one of the field entrances come 12 white doves. And then a shot rang out. This arena has the best acoustics in the world. This noise sounded just like a firearm. We all look up and see the announcer's window shaking, and 2 or 3 doves are falling to the ground. And then we see the culprit. Some hawks who make their home in the area were taking a well-deserved meal for the show. Not one of those doves made it out that day. And for the next hour or so, the cameramen at the arena were following the hawks around as they killed and ate the poor doves. It was fascinating to see the birds pick up and fly, hide the birds so they could eat in peace. Also, at the end of the day, the doves were cut from the opening ceremonies. Not sports, I worked at a regional station. News broadcast with a female guest, no undies and short skirt. Nobody noticed until the producer mentioned she had nice legs, tried to get them in shot, followed by an, "Oh, frick, scrap that." We broadcasted lady parts for less than 10 frames and got hundreds of complaints. It still makes me laugh. And those wondering how she reacted, nobody ever commented on it with her. The interview was finished, she left through the control room and people said, "Bye." And when she was out of eyesight, the producer had a rant and everyone else just couldn't control themselves laughing. When the host came out, she didn't have a clue. The look on her face was priceless. Back in the 80s, we had a VCR tape that was put together by the crews that worked the sporting events back in the day. My dad's best friend was an engineer that did that sort of work. There were people screwing, players running across the field with giant marital aids, undressed people, people going to town with their mouths on others with their pants down, shirtless girls on the infield at races, a drunk buck-wild dude running and jumping in the mud in the infield like a big pig, and more doing of the deed than you've seen anywhere else. There was depravity I hadn't seen at that point in my life. I wish we still had that tape. Not a cameraman, but I was at a Nebraska game a few years back, and they were getting shots of the crowd on a jumbo screen at one point. They get a nice shot of a guy holding up a big sign saying, "Go Black Shirts," or something to that effect. Within seconds of him realizing he's on camera, he lets that sign drop, and right behind that one there's another sign with, "F her right in the hoo-ha," written larger than life on it. You've never seen a camera pan away faster in your life. Everyone in my section looked at each other for a few seconds, asking ourselves, did we just see that? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One of the best signs I ever saw was when they were scanning the crowd and there was a guy holding a sign that says, "You can't spell the word for the male reproductive organ without ESPN. They cut away real quick, but I laughed for a while on that one. Well, now every time the narrator sees a male eggplant, he's going to think of an American sports broadcaster. And I don't know what to think of that. It's not positive or negative, just sort of an annoying, unnecessary change in my life that will amount to nothing. I work for an AV company, and one of the things some of my coworkers do is create bingo cards based off our predictions and the theme of the event. In order to get the bingo space, they have to be captured on camera live on the big screen, and we have to pan away from it. Our most frequent occurrences are girls flashing the camera when they see themselves on the big screens, chubby men who also flash the camera, gay men in Daisy Dukes who jump and jostle themselves out of their shorts, and kiss cam couples that get handsy, and catching unsuspecting people digging for gold like their lives depended on it. I used to do camera work and the big sound dishes you see on the football sidelines, aka the salad bowls. Several sound sources would be merged together to get the collision of sounds, grunts, quarterback hikes, and stuff like that. What we got to hear, but not broadcasted, was the awesome trash talk between the players, including insults against mums, sisters, and girlfriends. I'm not a camera operator, but I had all of the feeds from the cameras that you would have in the truck while doing live streaming for a bunch of major events. NFL football games pretty much always featured a couple of fistfights and usually some flashing. FIFA had tons of undressed people pretty much all of the time. Honestly, the sheer amount of au naturel human beings and the fights and stuff just became routine really fast. A funny one that's sort of in the spirit of these other answers was listening to Chris Berman and some other announcer, who I can't remember, while watching the feed of some guy taking a pee on the golf course that a camera was just holding on. They laughed for a long while, and then it just got weird. The guy was taking an epic whiz. I mean, Tom Hanks in a league of his own kind of epic. Berman went from thinking it was hilarious to this can't really be happening, and back to it being hilarious because it just went on for so long. And to top it off, not only was this guy completely hammered at something like 9:30 in the morning, no judgment, I've been there, but also totally out in the open. I mean, making no attempt to hide at all. People were walking past him and either just pretending it wasn't happening or sort of scurrying past him. And it was a major event. I can't remember which one, but it was a big deal like the Masters or one of the other majors for sure. A less funny one, but one that I'll never forget, is the Red Bull Stratus jump. We had all the telemetry from the suit as well as the feed, and when he went into that flat spin, there was a good 10 seconds where we thought he was dead. Not like going to be dead, but actually dead, because we lost all telemetry. It came back before we pulled the plug on the stream, and obviously he made it, but that was a tense 10 seconds, and the kind of 10 seconds that feels like an hour. Oh, and then this one that seemed like nothing but was then devastating. We were doing the Winter Olympics, the year that poor guy on the luge crashed and actually did die, but that one actually went to air. It was pulled from every replay later, and obviously no one knew how bad it was at the time, but it was pretty crazy for a while. In short, drunk people doing drunk people things, near death, and actual death. When I was younger, we had one of those giant satellite dishes. During commercial breaks, the feed would continue, and the cameramen would scan the stands for hot women. I'm a Toronto kid. Our baseball team, the Blue Jays, play a venue called the Skydome, now the Rogers Centre. Ugh. And one of the perks of the stadium is that it contains a hotel. If you book a room, some of the room's windows look out over the field. Anyway, the cameramen used to pan along the hotel windows occasionally, either live to air or just in the stadium itself on the Jumbotron. Until one time, a couple was having very intense and spirited adult fun against the hotel window, and that was the last time the cameramen shot footage of the hotel rooms. I have a few stories to share. Back in 2004, I worked for the Denver Broncos as a sideline video journalist, with my video airing on the NFL Network and denverbroncos.com. Being from Denver, it was a dream come true. I had a lot of video that was great but would never get aired. Everything from overly enthusiastic Raiders fans shouting obscenities at and brawling with each other while tailgating, to a Chiefs fan flashing me in the parking lot. A lot happens at NFL games, and drunk people do some very unexpected things when you point cameras at them. My two favorite stories weren't even from when we had the camera rolling, however. In one of our preseason games, we played Buffalo in Buffalo. I was new to the team and still a bit starstruck myself. I was on field decked out in Broncos gear, team polo, hat and stuff like that. Before the game started, just standing on the sideline and enjoying watching the team warm up, two young Broncos fans, maybe 6 or 7, caught my eye and started frantically waving me over to them. I smiled and walked over and was tickled when they asked me for my autograph. I asked if they knew who I was, and they said, no, of course not, but they didn't care. They just wanted someone's autograph. I laughed and signed their ticket stubs. And to this day, it makes me giggle thinking that someone out there has my autograph and very likely a silly childhood memory. And my second favorite memory was a bit more scandalous. We were in San Diego playing the Chargers. And once again, I was down on the field pre-game. This was the year that SoCal native Ruben Drowns was tearing up the league, and we had a sizable fan base turn out. A smoking hot blonde in the front row caught my eye, winked at me, and beckoned me to come over. Obviously, I went without hesitation. "Hi," she said with a sensual grin. "Do you know Ruben? Do you think you could get him to sign something for me?" I knew him well enough to ask if he was up for it, but in pre-game it was hit or miss whether he would. "I can try," I said. "What do you want signed?" And she handed me a pair of white, stringy undies with a Broncos logo on them. They were still warm. With a laugh, I handed them back and said, "I'll ask." I walked over to where he was standing and pointed out the woman before telling him about the request. He laughed, gave her a huge wave and a smile, before telling me, "Hell no, man." I work with a marathon company doing timing. We have photographers on course every few miles or so. The photographers turn on their SD cards at the end of the day with all of the pictures on them. Then the several tens of thousands of pictures are automatically sorted by participants. The software reads the participant number on the bibs, then assigns it to that participant. No human is curating the photos, which can occasionally lead to problems. Anyway, we got an email once from a man who was unhappy because his member was hanging out of his shorts. It's also semi-common for runners to lose control of their bodily functions. So every once in a while we get an email from someone asking us to remove the picture of them with crap running down their legs. I'll be forever thankful for you for the imaginary image of a keen race participant's face as they look up the photos of themselves based on their badge number and just see that they've been shown in a compromising moment on the internet for all to see. I think nearly as funny would be the people who didn't take bad photos themselves, but then they realize there's a loose sausage or a bout of diarrhea in the background or foreground of their picture. I was on camera 9 at a baseball game, which means in about 99% of all scenarios, my camera isn't getting used. All I'm doing is scanning the crowds on the opposite side for babies, fathers with their sons, happy couples, and stuff they can just cut to fill airtime between innings and stuff. Every now and again there would be a pop fly and I got to trace that over to whoever caught it, and sometimes pan to the dugout, but it was really just a crowd camera for when they hit home runs. So I'm panning through people as the pitcher is setting up his next throw, and the director goes, "Well, camera 9, get a close-up of that girl in the pink shirt." So I do, and I'm not exaggerating, saying that she has a sized 36 triple Q chest, barely covered by this pink tank top. So I get a close-up of her, and he says, "Okay, lock it down." So I do. Sat there for the next 45 minutes with nothing happening, because baseball is extremely boring to film, and got paid to look at the gargantuan pear on this woman. Ended up getting bought back because the director liked my work so much. Ugh, dude, that's so gross. I know you were told to do that, but it seems incredibly objectifying and violating. Also, I'd bet money that your gross director got way too much enjoyment from that footage, if you know what I mean. Not 100% of the question, but I worked at a major news outlet that had done a story that a small group of people didn't like, so we had maybe 30 people outside protesting. They'd crudely made signs on sticks and were kind of doing a circle like you see union protesters doing. One of the cameramen was filming it from where we were, outside of a second-floor window. One guy seemed to be walking slower than the rest and had trouble keeping the nicely spaced circle, and people kind of bunched up naturally around him. Out of nowhere, the guy just projectile chucks up, hitting a few other protesters, and everyone is a mixture of grossed out and confused. Suddenly the circle of protesters breaks up and people are running in every direction, and 2 minutes later, no more protest. A pile of throw-up is the only evidence that anyone was ever there. We watched that video over and over. The editing team slowed it down, put it to music and stuff. Never laughed so much in my life. Best time in an otherwise stressful job. I used to be cameraman for a big-time sports event, and one time I saw the hot dog selling guy pull out a hot dog and put it in his pants so it looked like he had a real big-time sausage. I mean, go to any Bills game in Buffalo and you'll probably see about as crazy as it gets. Bills fan here, can confirm. The first Major League Baseball game I went to had something like this happen. I was about 16 and went with a bunch of buddies. We got in right before the game was starting, and the cameraman was scanning the crowd and showing it on the Jumbotron. The camera settled on this happy bald man who smiled sweetly at the camera, paused, then held up the shocker. The camera cut immediately away. It was hilarious to us 16-year-olds. I was the digital archivist for an NHL franchise. Part of my job was to log footage of the game, tag clips of big goals and hits and stuff. I was fast-forwarding through the in-house feed when I noticed a hit. A big hit. I mean an almighty drop-the-shoulder body check right in front of the crease. The unusual thing? It was during the intermission. The team mascot, a 40-year-old man, was the perpetrator, and the victim, a 6-year-old girl. What's the most unhinged thing you've caught on surveillance footage? I had a game camera out once, and a neighbor who'd just walk through my property any time. I didn't care, the place is just pretty big and there's no back fence. But I kept having sheep go missing, so I set out a camera. The camera caught my neighbor walking by, and then like 30 seconds later, a frickin' mountain lion walked by it, stalking him. It apparently never attacked as he was fine, but he had no idea how close he was to that thing. I used to work overnights at a hotel and would monitor the security cameras. They'd detect motion, and a little indicator would blink when motion was, well, detected. Anyways, it always gave me the creeps when I'd hear the elevator ding. I'd run out to the lobby to greet the guest, to make sure they didn't need something or whatever, and nobody would get off the elevator. I'd watch the tapes and see the motion indicator blinking on a floor, then see the elevator open on that floor, then see the elevator open on the ground floor and the motion indicator blink on the camera down the hall. It gave me the heebie-jeebies. Also, one time I was in my office in the middle of the night, and it sounded like somebody banged on the door with the side of their fist. Just one single slam. You can see me reacting to it on the video. My head whipped around to face the door where the sound came from, then immediately whipped around to stare at the camera to see who the frick was outside my door. There was nobody there, and none of the motion sensors had picked up anything. Not fun finishing the rest of that shift. I was house-sitting in a huge house and set up a canary camera near my bedroom. I had an uneasy feeling that somebody else was in the house with me, so I set up the camera just to make sure nobody came near my room. In the middle of the night, somebody approached it from behind and turned it so that it faced a blank wall. Then a few minutes later, it turned it back the way it was. It tripped the canary and I got a notification on my phone. I saw it and searched the house thoroughly the next morning and I never found anything. Needless to say, I slept with my door locked the rest of my time there. I have a home security system with a camera that watches the living room. I saw my cat and my dog both sitting in the dog's bed. The cat frickin' hates the dog. I think she was possessed. Theirs is a forbidden love. Goddamn pets. I mean, that is so funny because your life would objectively be better and happier if your pets got along whenever you were home. Like them pretending to hate each other with you around serves no purpose other than stressing out their owners. I blame the cat. I worked in a maximum security prison for a while. I was assigned to central control one night, which is where the camera screens were. One of the cameras was for the classifications room. I glanced at it and there was an inmate in there. It was super odd because it was 2 in the morning and nobody was supposed to be in there. Everyone that had keys to that room went home at 5. Anyway, so this inmate was just sitting in there doing nothing. I got the sergeant's attention and told him somebody was in there, and I gave him the spare key to the room. He went to go check it out with a couple of other people, but by the time he got there, the room was empty. They searched for like 15 minutes, but there was definitely nobody in there. I used to have an apartment pretty close to my office. The office building was kind of in a business district, but it was also kind of off on its own relative to the city's commercial district footprint. I sold the apartment, and before moving into my new home, I left my bicycle chained to the building's bike rack. It was only going to be there for a few days in that no man's land before I was finally able to move it to the new place. Anyway, one day, in the middle of the week, I came into the office, walked past the bike rack, and noticed that it was completely empty. The building has a bunch of security cameras, and one more or less is facing the bike rack since it's adjacent to the front entryway. I sat and watched the security tape with the IT guy. We're watching, we see everyone leave the office the night before, see the bike, keep watching, and then all of a sudden, poof, the bike is gone. We slowed the tape down, and it seemed like when you're watching digital cable or satellite and the image gets garbled. Literally, it was bike there, then poof, gone. In the tape's timestamp, it literally happened in 1 second. I assume my bike got taken to the upside down. Did the IT guy edit the surveillance footage to make it look like his bike straight up disappeared? The ultimate grift. I work in security. During the weekdays, I'm doing parking, while weekends I'm at the desk solo. I'll always remember this one Saturday. It was the second shift ever working the weekend, and I was watching the cameras when this one guy came to the side door. He looked around inside, and just before I could activate the speaker to let him know he was on private property, he looked directly at the camera and stared what felt like a minute. When I took my hand away from the button, he started to walk away. I ran to the side door to see if I could see where the heck he was walking, and he was just gone. The only thing in that direction was more frickin' wall. So, to this day, whenever I'm watching the cameras, I'm waiting for this guy. This happened a few years before I started working at my current job. The elevators in my building go down to the first and second basement. Late one night, one of our security guards spotted a group of people heading into the elevator at level 4. He thinks it's curious because nobody's supposed to be in the building after midnight. So he keeps a close watch on all the lobby cameras to see which floor the group alights at. The doors open at basement 2, but nobody comes out. The second guard scurries down to the elevator doors while the first keeps his eyes on the cameras to make sure no one has left. When the second guard gets to the basement elevator, he looks puzzled and searches around. He comes back to the guard station to confirm that it is indeed empty. Putting the building on lockdown, the two guards spend the rest of the night combing the building together, but they were unable to find anyone or anything. They decided to call the police, who reviewed the footage and see the same thing. In the end, the sighting was still unexplained, but my workplace decided to stop being cheap and installed security cameras in the elevators as well. I edited together the footage from the security cameras outside Pulse before, during, and after the tragedy there. Though there were many sad or disturbing things to be seen, the strange one was a wounded man that appeared out of nowhere. He waved his hands for help, and the cops came over and carried him to safety. I tried numerous times to rewind to find out where he'd come from, but he was just there, or he wasn't. He didn't crawl to where he'd gotten, he kind of just appeared there. He looked like he made it out okay at least. I used to work at a place which was required to be manned 24 hours a day. The reason being is that I handled sensitive documents and files, and if somebody needed this information in the middle of the night, I'd have to fetch it for them or confirm that I had it. Anyways, security was kinda tight. Bars on the windows, multiple locked doors to get to where I was. They'd give me work to do during the night, but underestimated how quickly I could get it done. So, like most nights, I finished my work in like 30 to 45 minutes, pulled out my phone and played games and Netflix browsed and Reddit, since nobody else was in the building. So now it was getting to be the last third of my shift when all of a sudden I hear a door close. I looked at the security camera and see somebody walking down a hall towards my room. At first I thought it was just somebody that had come in, ridiculously early of course, so I turned around and waited for them to come in. But then nobody came, and the hairs started raising on the back of my neck. Now, this isn't really a big building, so I figured I'd find the guy wherever he is and just start checking offices and storage rooms, but I came up empty-handed. However, I do see that a fire door has been shut. I go to try and rewind the camera, but the digital recording is password protected and I don't know that password. Anyways, the whole thing had freaked me out. The way that person was walking down the hallway like a determined walk right to where I was. So I sat with my spine tingling for the last couple of hours of my shift, and finally people started coming in. My replacement shows up and I tell her what I saw, and at this point I figured I must have imagined the whole thing. I'm told to go home, and the manager and girl who replaced me would look over the camera. After getting home, I called my manager and asked what was on the camera. So they said that the video showed the fire door closing, but then the video froze for about an hour. The next thing it records is me reopening the door. Okay, there are a lot more ghosts in this batch of stories than I would have suspected. Honestly, my money was on you people catching people doing the deed all over the place or pulling crimes, and instead we got some supernatural stuff. Way to pleasantly surprise me, Internet. Loss prevention officer here. I see crazy stuff go down all the time. One of the creepiest things I've seen was a string of toys moving on its own down an aisle. It was like a duck with the smaller ducks behind it. Of course, I had to investigate it. When I zoomed in, I was surprised to see they were real ducks. My brother-in-laws own a pub. One night, all of the alarms start going off. This is unusual because if you were breaking into a place and the alarm went off, you'd quickly grab something and run away. For all of the alarms to go off, you'd have to have a whole bunch of people running amok through the pub, or one person who just doesn't care about the alarms. Brother-in-law calls the police and races to the pub. One of the front doors has been smashed to pieces. A giant rock is laying on the floor. One of the bar areas has been disturbed. A lockbox is missing. The pub appears to be empty. He stands outside the door so that nobody else can get in. The police arrive and they do a sweep. Nothing further is found. They review the footage to find a drunk man staggering up to the door carrying a giant rock. It doesn't take a big rock to smash a glass door. The rock was bigger than a basketball. The guy holds it above his head and throws it through the glass door. He casually steps through the smashed glass. The alarm sounds, but he doesn't appear to notice or care. In no particular hurry, drunk man walks behind the bar, opens a fridge and pulls out a bottle of cider. He drinks it and leaves the bottle on the bar. He then starts looking around for money and finds a lockbox with a couple of $1,000 in it for a footy tipping competition. He puts the box on the bar, grabs a bottle of Jack Daniels before casually strolling out into the night holding the bottle and the lockbox. The police found him at the railway station. He was asleep on the bench with the money from the lockbox in his pocket. Next to him was a bin containing a broken lockbox and an empty bottle of Jack. I can only assume this criminal mastermind thought he was pulling the heist of the century in his drunken stupor. I should point out that to this day they have no idea where that giant rock came from. The pub is opposite a park which doesn't appear to have any landscaping rocks, and the nearest house would be over 150 meters away. It took 2 people to remove that rock from the crime scene. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I don't work in surveillance, but I used to work at a college and I had to review 18 hours of security footage once to see who was vandalizing some bulletin boards. It happened sometime between noon on Saturday and 8 a.m. on Sunday, so I had to sit there and review the footage. I watched a half a dozen couples fight, this guy off his brain on green herbs staring at the bulletin board for probably 10 minutes at 3 p.m., a drunk girl in heels fall over and drag her 2 other friends down with her. They then rolled around laughing their butts off at 9 p.m., a couple doing the deed in the hall at 11 p.m., a guy in a chicken costume going for a stroll at 3 a.m., and then some shady dude in a hood wander around and press his ear to the doors at 4 a.m. About a year ago, I had cameras installed around my house, initially to catch mail thieves. One morning, after noticing my back gate ajar, I reviewed the footage from the night before. I watched as a would-be burglar, at 3 a.m., pried open the gate and crept towards the living room. He suddenly stopped and started backing away when he noticed I was home and awake. I was actually just a few feet away in the living room with the blackout curtains closed. He must have spotted light peeking out the bottom of the curtains. The motion-activated lights kicked on as he simultaneously ran out the back gate and into the woods behind our yard. I was awake, transitioning to a mid-shift, and ironically I had a table full of weapons as I disassembled them for cleaning after a day at the range. It's probably good that I didn't see or hear him that night. We both would have freaked out. I used to work security at a college dorm, and I once witnessed one of the doors on a washing machine slowly open itself and then proceed to tear itself clean off the machine. I told my boss this creepy story and showed him the video, and he made me review camera footage for the rest of the night to find out who broke the washing machine, despite the fact that he watched it break itself. I believe he ended up writing up the last person to use it, even though that guy didn't do anything wrong. I'm so glad that I don't work there anymore. I used to see little crescent-shaped light orbs floating around the back dock of a nursing home that I did a little security for when I was young. First time I saw it, I thought it was a reflection of a flashlight and that somebody was screwing around behind the building. I jumped up and ran to that door, only to find out that it was pitch dark and no kind of movement of any kind was going on. The only explanation I was ever able to come up with is that it had something to do with the electrical panel energizing when the AC units would kick on. I don't know for sure, but that little theory made me feel a little better. Also around that time, the nurses found a cat that had been deboned, sprawled out on the sidewalk in front of the healthcare entrance. The paws and skull were the only hard bits left. Ugh. I have cameras on my front and back doors that send video to my phone when they detect movement. I was out of town and woke up seeing several police officers walking around my front and backyard. I called my neighbor to find out what had happened, and I found out that somebody had crashed their car through my back fence, which borders the highway. I helped a friend install a camera inside an elevator. The mall guards had a special hard drive for interesting footage. They showed us an elderly couple making out inside an elevator. It wasn't creepy because they were old, but because of how sweet Grandma and Grandpa turned into lost beasts as soon as the door closed, and then just back to sweet just before the door opened again. That elevator has seen a lot of action, gay, straight, and other, but that couple was in the top 10. I have a home security system. I left for work one morning. I walked out my back door, got in my car, and pulled out of my driveway. The moment I left the driveway, a homeless would-be burglar came out from hiding on the side of my house and tried to open my back door. When he found it locked, he reluctantly wandered off after looking around for a bit. I never would have known if it weren't for the cameras. It makes you wonder what goes on without your knowledge. And I'd like to take a moment to advocate for home security systems. Please consider purchasing one. The ability to see what goes on around your home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is absolutely priceless. My camera system aids in investigation of at least 3 petty crimes in my neighborhood per year. Hit and runs, petty larceny, stuff like that. I mean, fair sentiment, I guess, if you have a full-blown house with a garden. Honestly, I'm not sure how easy it is to install one in a concrete apartment like mine, or that you'd catch much useful. Add to that the fact that I record from home, and I'm more likely to just awkwardly walk into the criminals on my way to the kitchen, and it's one of those things that I'll likely put off for a while. I work for a security company. We install and monitor CCTV on construction sites. One night, about 2 a.m., our response officer gets a call from the monitoring system to say that there's a guy walking around one of the buildings under construction. They describe him as tall, dressed in all black with his hood up, but they couldn't see his face because he had his back to the camera. He wasn't stealing or vandalizing, just wandering around. It's usually homeless people looking for the shelter. So the response goes to investigate. When he gets there, there's nobody around, so he asks the station to check the camera covering the way in and out of the building to see which direction the guy went. But there's nothing. He does a full patrol of the site and there's no trace of anyone. The only other way for this guy to get out was to shimmy down some scaffolding, and he could be hurt, so the response officer asks the station to do a check on all of the camera footage through the night to see if there's any sign of him leaving. There's nothing. The next day, we ask the station to send over the stills from when they initially picked the intruder up. And he's not on any of them, just footage of our response officer walking around. We were pretty freaked out talking about it in the office, and it was laughed off as the monitoring officer being sleepy and seeing things. Except the cameras we have use infrared beams, and they only alert the monitoring station when somebody breaks those beams. I used to work doing part-time surveillance work for an art gallery. I went in horribly sick one day because I worked on a contract and I had to meet a quota for so many hours. Otherwise, I'd have to make it up elsewhere, which was borderline impossible for me because I only had free time on weekends when they were closed. So here I am with a fever and a trash can, dripping sweat and staring at these screens, when all of a sudden, on the lower gallery, I see this black, oozing mass creeping across the floor. It just kinda slithered across the brick, up the wall, pooled into a perfect circle in the middle of the room, and then it stood up into this weird, elongated shadow person with spindly arms and no eyes. It looked up at the camera, then very rapidly melted back into the floor and bolted towards the hallway that led to my desk. I screamed bloody murder, and then I threw up. Also, no, that thing wasn't really there. I was just way sicker than I thought. It was a fever hallucination. My boss came in and sent me home shortly after she came to see if I'd died, and I actually still use that weird gangly thing my brain came up with as a motif in some of my art. I'm a personal banker now, but at the time this story took place, I was an administrative assistant for a banking executive. The office I worked at was our regional headquarters, so there were a lot of different departments around. One such department was manned by a friend of mine who I would often take breaks with. One day I went into the basement and towards his cubicle where he was reviewing robbery footage of a local branch. This was around Halloween, and these crooks had watched way too much TV before coming up with their plan. If you know anything about bank robberies, there's hardly ever a takeover situation. These guys barged into the branch wearing Scream Halloween masks and capes. A customer stood up from the chair he was sitting in and got pistol whipped by one robber, while the other robber hopped the teller counter and pointed his piece at the teller. This poor teller was only on his second day and was still in training. He tried to open the drawer and it was locked. He didn't have the keys. He got pistol whipped too and fell to the ground. I don't remember exactly how much they got away with, but it wasn't much. Something about watching all of that take place in silence and in black and white on my friend's computer really creeped me out. They were caught a few hours later. They parked the getaway car right in front of their apartment and were counting money with the curtains open. Idiots. A man absolutely destroying his meat in the middle of an empty parking lot. I used to manage a retail swimming pool store, and we had a nice koi pond in the side yard. I chiefly cared for it, feeding the fish and cleaning out the leaves and filter and stuff, so I named all of the fish and grew to care about them. Then one day I was walking through the side yard to get to the back office when I noticed there were no fish in the pond. It's not a big pond, maybe a foot or two at its deepest and 7 feet long. It's not like they're all hiding. At first I thought somebody had hopped the fence and stolen the fish. Koi are expensive after all. So I reviewed the security footage from the night before to try and catch the cretin who did that, and at 6 a.m. I caught him. A giant heron with a 6-foot wingspan came down and helped himself to some lox for breakfast. Man, I felt sad. Luckily, one of the traumatized survivors appeared. He came out of some hiding hole in the wall. He was named Subway because he was about a foot long. We bought more fish to keep him company, and I made a rock cove covering over half the pond so that they could flee in case that damn heron came back. When I worked at Sears in high school, there was a theft in my department, and the LP team pulled us into their surveillance room to interview us. While they were asking me questions, I kept being distracted by all the monitors. Right above the guy asking me questions, I saw a small TV that had 16 smaller screens, and I realized the cameras were in the dressing rooms. I didn't see anyone in there at the time, and the guy interviewing me saw me looking. He turned to the console and turned that monitor off real quick. Super creepy, if you ask me. In short, Sears has cameras in their dressing rooms. How did a student completely tank their own college application? The amount of students who glue Rice to their applications to Rice University is too damn high. My favorite email I ever received was a reply to an admission where all the kids said was, "Hey, we made it!" I printed that out from my desk for sure. Graduate school admissions. Our application requires 4 separate essays. This student wrote all 4 as a long, drawn-out love letter to one of our faculty members. The faculty member wasn't taking new students into the lab and had never met or talked to the prospective student. The student had taken all of the info for her love letters from his website, in addition to providing a list of his publications, also from his website, that she had read. I walked away from reading her application with zero sense of who she was, but having learned a great deal about the faculty member. We had an applicant send in a book they wrote and published themselves. It was difficult for us to really read it because for some reason the book really stank. We just put it in their file and shut the door. Like, stank as in literally smelled bad? Yeah, it was awful. The book itself seemed fine, but the odor made it really difficult to read. I am a college soccer coach. I was at a college recruitment event. At these events, they hand out profile booklets. In the section of interesting facts, one of the players' bios had an ad for a car that he was selling. I know a college admissions person, and one time they told me that a student wrote down that they can distinguish bra cup sizes by a simple glance at a woman. They were not impressed. Whitewater farting. He meant whitewater rafting. Someone wrote a lovely and extensive essay on how they wanted to go to Vanderbilt for an application to American in DC. My high school counselor told us about a kid who did something similar. He sent his essays to the wrong schools, but when he realized what he had done, he sent them both photos of himself with his foot in his mouth, and they both accepted him. Honestly, you have nothing to lose at that point. You're definitely not getting in if you just leave it be, so why not just admit that you wrote 2 personalized letters that went in the wrong envelope each? Not everyone would go with the humorous angle, but it worked with this guy. My college proudly advertised that in my class we had an Oreo stacking champion. Never figured out who it was after 4 years. At a law school I was considering attending, the admissions people told the story of a woman who had sent a shoe in with her application, along with a note that said, "Now I have a foot in the door." I once had an applicant come through who put in that their preferred name was the Turtle on their college application. An applicant literally wrote something along the lines of, "Please don't accept me, I don't want to go to your school," in the addendum section of our application because his parents forced him to apply. Another time, an applicant submitted an essay composed of Japanese characters that when put through Google Translate turned out to be a loosely translated version of Cat in the Hat. One of ours wrote that they were a people person because they had multiple personalities. I wrote a 750-word admission essay describing the smell of baked potatoes. Maybe not what they had in mind, but I got accepted and I went on to attend that university. The worst CV I ever saw as part of an application to a graduate program was a barely intelligible, unformatted mess that included such bits of information as, "She likes to spend her free time reading and her favorite book is 50 Shade Grey. Why waste time say lot word when few word do trick?" I won't say how I know this person, but he answered an essay question asking what he'd do if he had $100 by explaining that he'd go to the local playground where homeless people congregated and host a mini Olympics where the homeless could compete for the 150 burgers he purchased with the money. The idea was to feed them, but also do a study in human behaviors. This was for John Hopkins, and I'm pretty sure they weren't pleased with his answer. And to answer some repeated questions, it's not that $100 was a lot of money. It was more that JH wanted to see how you'd spend a small amount of money for the greatest effect. Also, the burgers were that cheap because at the time, BK was having a special on Tuesdays. The essay went into all the pricing to demonstrate frugality. And no, this person did not get in. I'm sure the essay is on their wall of shame now. I'm not an admissions officer, but a couple of years ago, a girl sent in an application to my university in larger than normal packaging. Somebody in the admissions office decided it was suspicious looking and might be a bomb. A section of campus got shut down, and Bomb Squad got to use their fancy toys to figure out it was just a regular application that the girl had attached lights to so that her app would stand out.
But did she get accepted?
No, she bombed the interview. That they were dead. The mom was still in denial and sent out a ton of applications. When I was young, my grandfather often took me out hunting for peasants. He meant pheasants. And to be fair, this was a Princeton application, so for all we know he might have also hunted the poor. I heard this one from a rather unpleasant admissions officer there. Maybe she stole the story from somewhere to scare high school seniors everywhere.
Sounds like someone I had class with in high school who had wealthy lawyer parents. He called everybody peasants and ended up getting arrested for posting online about his plan to shoot up our school. He escaped severe legal punishments because of said wealthy lawyer parents. When I applied to medical school, one of the application essays had a prompt that asked us what we'd do if we didn't get into medical school. I wrote that I'd go to law school and become a lawyer specializing in prosecuting medical malpractice. I ended up getting an interview and had a good laugh about it with one of the interviewers. I did not get into that medical school. Law school admissions. We had a woman apply multiple times, but there was clearly something not mentally right with her. Our essay topic was basically, why this law school? She started the essay, verbatim minus this name omission. Who am I? I am Jane Doe. I want to go to law school and marry lawyer. She also said that she wanted to go to law school to work for her boss, Donald Trump/Barack Obama. It was clearly a recycled essay and she had missed some of the updates. She switched out the names. She also wrote about how she cured cancer, discovered how to regenerate amputated limbs with stem cells, and reversed grey hair back to its original color. She'd also routinely send handwritten addendums to her application with more of her accomplishments to be added to her file. Her letters of recommendation included one from her pastor that said she used to regularly attend his church, but she's no longer following the teachings of the church, so he can't recommend her for anything in good conscience. Then there was a letter from her therapist who said with a large amount of one-on-one assistance, she may be able to complete a law school level course, and the generic form letter responses you get when you write a letter to the president. She had a 132 LSAT score, the lowest I've ever seen, so we never actually had to consider her, but I was actually pretty nervous she'd show up eventually. Campus police knew who she was and got copies of all of her letters. I talked to another admissions counselor at a school across the country, and she was doing the same thing to their office as well. I should clarify that this is in no means meant to pick on someone with a mental illness. I only worked in admissions temporarily, and actually I now work in the mental health field. I know she's sick, and from the letter her therapist sent in, I think he really cares about her well-being, so I'm hoping she gets the help she needs and deserves. She said some off-the-wall things, and it was ridiculous to see it in the setting I saw it in. I think it would be highly unethical to allow someone like this into law school. The stress of law school can break some emotionally stable people, so it would be cruel to subject her to that stress. It would also be unethical to allow her to take on a mountain of debt with no chance of graduating or passing the bar. One of my high school teachers used to read a newsletter that highlighted these types of things. My favorite one was that for one of the essays, the applicant was asked, "Ask yourself a question and then answer it." And the student's response, "Do you play the tuba?" "No." And he got accepted. Today I learned I worked too hard on my admissions essays.
You're telling me? Apparently you're in if you can make a good one-liner or demonstrate that your parents are wealthy. Also, are these a thing in the UK as well as the States? Because all of the universities I've attended or worked at in my life required no such personal touches. I feel compelled to tell this story, even though it's slightly off topic. I intern in the admissions office at a decently prestigious private California university, and I overhear the counselors making decisions. They regularly shout stats across the office to get other people's input on whether or not to accept or deny applicants. There was one kid who was right on the edge of what we normally accept, the lower end of the spectrum. My boss shouted out his stats and got mixed responses. Then she said the infamous phrase I'll never forget. "But guys, I Zillowed his house. It's $4 million in Los Angeles." And they frickin' let him in. That was the determining factor for this kid's college career. I'll never forget sitting there in horror listening to them joke about his wealth. I have so little respect for college admissions, at least at my school, and the administration after hearing that. A high school classmate of mine was forced to apply in-state by his parents. He'd already been accepted out of state for early admissions. So naturally, he took his beautifully written essays, put them through Google Translate a couple of times, and then submitted the results. He got waitlisted. He'd already been accepted into his dream out-of-state school, and parents had agreed to pay for it if I recall correctly, so not really being a butthead there. Also, the in-state school is quite prestigious, I think top 30, so we were all mildly shocked and amused to hear that he had been waitlisted. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My wife was an admissions counselor for a small, well-known Bible college in downtown Chicago. She got a ton of crazy applications. Quite a few came from people proclaiming things like, "I'm the prophet Robert and I've been given a prophecy and written them down. I need this degree to get this added to the Bible." One particular time she was at work and it was towards the end of the day, so most had already gone home. Well, they had a walk-in prospective student come to the office and want to meet with an admissions counselor. My wife was the only one left for the day, so she went into a fairly small conference room to speak about any questions he might have about the school and how to go about the application process. This man was a middle-aged male who didn't look out of the ordinary. About 10 minutes into their meeting, he then started slowly going off the rails about his testimony, his life story, even though my wife never asked for it. He starts talking about how God had been giving him visions for years of things he needed to accomplish while on Earth. Apparently, a small Bible degree was one of the small list of things needed. My wife then sees through the window on the door behind the man a few public safety officers come in and speaking to the secretary. They then interrupt their meeting and escort the man off campus. Before he left a big pile of handwritten papers that were new books of the Bible that needed to be added. Apparently, he was on their red flag list because he'd done this many times before for about 20 years, including making extreme death threats to their counselors for not letting him into the school and had once even attacked a student employee. This is one of a long list of crazies that contact her. She has a folder of crazy emails that were too hilarious to delete from this earth. In short, many prophets coming in proclaiming to be on a mission from God to deliver new books of the Bible to my wife. I had a friend who responded to the question, "Tell us about yourself," by drawing himself using lines and dashes on the computer and labeling parts of his face. He was accepted. Every time this question comes up, there's always people complaining about kids who've something really petty for their hardship they overcame essay. But also, they complain when kids write those essays about how they've never really had a hardship to overcome. Yeah, that essay kind of screws over people who've had a decent life, as well as screwing people who've had a traumatic experience, and writing a whole thing about it would trigger PTSD. Also, screwing over people who've overcome a real hardship but want to keep their private life private. Honestly, it really shouldn't be a prompt. For their GPA, they put 95. One student listed their high school as I don't know. One student listed their intended major as teaching and their minor in principal. I asked one person how to spell their name, and they had to ask their mother how to spell it. Multiple people have actually tried listing their IQ as a reason for admittance. If you get to write your own personal essay, do not write "why" as the title of the essay, and the entire essay be "why not?" Maybe not too ridiculous, but those stuck with me. I'm sure that last person was super smug thinking their essay was genius. My brother applied to a religious private school, and one prompt was, "In what way has God encouraged you to pursue law?" And his answer was not applicable. He got in and used the scholarship to negotiate funding at the schools he wanted to go to. I got into a great university, and about a year later, a guy from my hometown messaged me asking if I could look over his application form. Now, I was over the moon because I was really proud of this guy for wanting to further himself, because I'd been worried he'd fall into our town's trap of poverty and dying young. Now, I'm not saying I rewrote his application, but if what he gave me was the alphabet, then I gave him back the entire damn works of Shakespeare. Some highlights include, when prompted to talk about what led him to seek out university qualifications, he answered something along the lines of, and this is grammatically exactly the same way he explained it, "My mate went and seemed like she had fun. I wanted to have fun but also get smarter." When asked to talk about any prior work experience or volunteering, he mentioned his time in McDonald's. It's not bad, still a job, but he didn't go into much depth besides that. He also said the time when he was younger and had to do community service for something. And when you get to the part of the application where it asks you why you want to attend that university, he literally said something along the lines of, "Oh, Google said it was good." Now, obviously, I couldn't rewrite it perfectly, because he'd get to the interview and they'd be able to tell somebody else had done all the work for him, but I tidied it up for him and gave him a pep talk for the interview, and clearly they saw that he was a great guy just looking to further himself, and he got in. At the part of the essay where they wrote, "What else would you like us to know?" I wrote about the birthday party I threw for my dog. At the end of that section I put, "If I were an admissions officer, I'd feel that this is relevant to the application." I was shockingly accepted. What? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with celebrating your poochie, but why did you put that? And you seem to have realized it was bonkers because you've answered this question with it. Here, I'm going to assume it was a tiny little extra short answer at the end after all of the actually relevant stuff. Well done anyway, I guess. About how she discovered her passion for science through a summer research internship where she studied microbiota swabbed from her butthole. My sister had to write an essay for a super Christian college she was applying to, and she wrote about the struggles she faced being atheist, and got accepted. That actually sounds legit. Most Christians are actually decent people who wouldn't think being an atheist disqualifies you from being in their school. A well-written essay on a topic like this ticks a lot of general college application boxes, like dealing with hardship or diversity and stuff, and would likely be well-received in most places. I'm out of the business now. I got a real job, but I was the transfers guy in addition to regular freshmen, and there are two cases that stick with me. The first was a phone call. A mum called in telling us her daughter should be let in with a 2.4. I was candid with her and told her it wasn't going to happen. She was well below our requirement. The mum started weeping. I mean, real honest weeping. I tried to calm her down some and asked her what it was all about. Parents generally just get angry. They don't give you the reaction that this woman gave me. She tells me she just found out she has late-stage brain cancer and she doesn't have anywhere for her daughter. And she hasn't told her yet. She had about 3 months. So basically, just enough time to help her daughter move in for freshman move-in day. I had her send in some documents from her doctor and took it to the director, and he made a special exception. We also made sure the girl had housing. It felt good to make a difference. The second case was a transfer who had a cumulative GPA of 1.78. I went to snap the denial off on that one before I saw the case had a pile of transcripts that hadn't been viewed. I popped up his star military transcript, and it looked like he'd joined the Navy after flunking out of community college. There was boot camp, then buds within 3 months, then team lead, then pages and pages of blacked out lines. I made the argument to the director that the guy who had 10 pages of Spec Ops leadership was in no way in heck going to flunk a college class, and that his transcripts be ignored and that he was treated as a fresh applicant. The director agreed, and I got a call from Africa on a satellite phone the next day saying thank you. The guy showed up a couple of weeks later to thank me in person and shake my hand. I had a student apply for a master's program, but the student didn't have a college degree. When I applied to college, the essay question was something like, "What is your favorite place?" I said the bathroom and spent the whole essay talking about how I loved going number 2. Did they accept that load of crap? Yeah, they also gave me a scholarship. I'm a decent writer, so it probably wasn't a bad essay, just wasn't what they were looking for. My college counselor in high school used to be an admissions person at an Ivy. She showed us the best essay she'd ever read as an example of ours. The essay was the kid's first time trying alcohol. He was a straight-A student spending a summer in Spain with a host family. They woke him up to take tequila shots for a cultural festival, and he'd never drank before because grades were everything. His essay was about how he drank to be nice to his host family and realized there is way more to life than just school and tunnel vision. She said that almost every school he applied to contacted his high school to say it was the best one they'd ever read, and he got into 3 Ivy Leagues. Yeah, either he was lying or he was definitely an F in geography. We do not do tequila shots for cultural festivals in Spain. That would be Mexico, if any. In Spain, we have a plethora of regional alcoholic beverages, none of them is tequila, which is made with agave that doesn't grow naturally in Spain. I forced my best friend to apply to a college he wasn't super interested in where I was applying. There was a section of the application where you describe your hobbies and past experience. He wrote walking as his first one with 17 years of experience and gravity as his employer. He got in. I read through a large number of these before realizing that we don't do this process in Australia as far as I know. I applied to Sarah Lawrence with my Why Our College essay being about how I'd heard about them from the Princess Diaries books. I got accepted. I received an 8-page diatribe PhD application, of which page 5 contained the sentence, "But enough about myself," finally culminating in this paragraph. I have aspirations to allow my research to impact the world, helping to eradicate poverty, neglect, health conditions, and possibly even on a global scale, with this PhD being the start of my life's work. If I were to aim big, I'd like to think that I could go on to do amazing and wonderful things. I do not aspire for the accolades, but feel if I work hard enough, I could achieve literally anything. Even a Nobel Peace Prize could be on the cards if I were allowed to just give my best. My dream is to be able to travel the world and teach people the importance of understanding a community as a whole. Teach people how to put aside differences and grow as one united worldwide community, and of course, change the world for the better. I just need to have the opportunity to get it started. You skeptic, this project sounds promising. What is it about? Ideally, I'd like to keep the project open and not focused on one specific geographical area, but feel I could definitely focus a lot of my knowledge on slums and areas with real problems with poverty and highlight issues around elitism versus extreme poverty. I'd focus on politics, religion, education, materialism, consumerism, and cultural norms, with the attempts of showing how issues within these can stop a community fully flourishing. I really do feel that this project could turn into a physical project and move forward with my own aspirations. I think I could focus more on the slums if you feel like this is an area that the university will support. I would be more than willing to visit various areas that have slums and try to learn about the problems the people face and how they'd want it to change. This man just wanted to create a new blueprint for society. I wrote my essay about procrastinating and getting distracted. I got accepted. I mean, at least you submitted it. For a specialized master's program working with children. While I have little experience with children, I believe my life experiences can help teach them, including my stint in prison and a brief stay in the mental hospital. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.